Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Sound test. Well, good morning, everyone. All right. Sorry, we had to mute our speakers up here. Hearing myself once is more than enough. I don't need to hear me on feedback loop. Appreciate everyone's attendance coming in today. I know the roads weren't fantastic and we had a bit of weather last night, so it's gratifying to see so many folks show up in person and online. With that, I'll ask our coordinator, Chris, to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning, friends.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Present.
And Chair David Brown.
I am here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chris. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendment listed as items 4.2, 4.3, and 5.1 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those specifically identified in the Planning Act who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on the 16th of April, 2025, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes 22 of the 6th of March 2025 are the minutes of the meeting of the 6th of March confirmed.
Confirmed.
Thank you very much. Item number 4.1 is the 2024 annual report pursuant to the Building Code Act. And I know John Buck is here and certainly ready to answer some questions. But colleagues, I didn't see any questions from us prior to the committee meeting starting today, and we haven't received any requests to speak, and there's no correspondence. So are there any questions for Mr. Buck, or could we carry this item?
Carried.
All right. I'll read out the recommendation that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs and Planning and Housing Committee recommend council receive this report for information. And you've said carried, so thank you very much. Item 4.2 is the zoning bylaw amendment for 3973 York's Corner Road. Cheryl McWilliams is here from our development review team. There's no presentation, no correspondence, and no request to speak. But I will ask if anyone is in the room today and they wish to speak to committee, would certainly entertain that. Not seeing anyone. The report recommendations are: 1, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 3973 York's Corners Road, as shown in document 1, to prohibit residential development on the retained land and to permit a reduction of the permitted lot width on the severed lands as detailed in document 2. And number 2, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation details section of this report. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. The next item is 4.3, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 4200 March Road. There is a presentation and a technical amendment, but I'm just going to hold this item. Go ahead and have a seat, Cheryl. There's another item that I think the committee will carry, and so in the interest of letting some staff get back to work, we'll hold 4.3 just for a moment. And we'll go to item 4.4, which is the amendment to the ATV, ORV, and snowmobile bylaw to expand ATV systems in South Ottawa. Mr. Thompson is here, our planner, who's been working on this. We do have 3 speakers, but they've informed me that they wish to speak only if they're here to answer questions. My understanding is that committee is prepared to carry this item. And other than the 3 gentlemen who registered to speak, is there anyone in the room who would wish to speak to this item today? Because we'd certainly like to hear from you if you did come. No. So colleagues, the report recommendation is that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommends City Council approve the ATV trail network expansion as a pilot for a period of 2 years in Osgood Ward, Rideau Jock Ward, and West Carleton March Ward through adoption of the recommended bylaw amendment as attached as document 2 and document 3 to this report? Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
All right, thank you very much. So we will go back to the previous item. Sorry. So item 4.3, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 4200 March Road. Would you like the technical amendment read in prior to the presentation?
Yeah.
Sure. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Whereas at the time of publication, the ward councillor comments section in the report stated that the councillor is aware of the application related to this report, and whereas the ward councillor provided updated comments which were mistakenly omitted from this version, therefore be it resolved that the ward councillor comments section be replaced with the comments as document 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll carry that before we carry the item or vote on the item later. But Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you, please.
Thank you. I have a presentation, so I'll just wait till it's queued up. So my name is Cheryl McWilliams. I'm a senior planner with the Rural Development Review Group and the file lead on this particular application. It's an application at 4200 March Road to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw for a quarry expansion and specifically the Thomas Cavanaugh West Carlton Quarry. Next slide, please. So this is an excerpt from Schedule B9 of the official plan, the Rural Transact Schedule, and it identifies the subject land with the red arrow. It shows as being designated green space currently. And the adjacent lands that are crosshatched are the bedrock resource overlay with the underlying rural countryside designation. Just to orient people a little bit, the road where Corkery is noted, that is March Road running on a diagonal northeast, southwest. The other black lined road abutting the existing quarry is Upper Dwyer Hill Road. Between concession and 11 and 12 on the sort of north side of March Road, that is Burnt Lands Road. Next slide, please. So this is also an excerpt from official plan schedule 11A, the Natural Heritage System schedule, and it identifies again the land at 4200 March Road, which shows as a bit of a corner fronting on March Road in the existing quarry. It identifies it as being part of the Natural Heritage System core area, as well as being within the natural environment area, which is outlined in sort of that orangish red shade. The conservation area identified is part of the burnt lands. The natural environment area outline is also part of the burnt lands Alvar, which is an area of natural and scientific interest as identified by the province. Abutting some of the natural environment area to the south and east is part of a provincially significant wetland known as Mannion Corners or Long Swamp. Also showing a little hard to see, but it's a bit of a green shade underlying the core area on the subject land is the Natural Heritage Features Overlay, which identifies other heritage features, natural heritage features. Next slide, please. This is from Geo-Ottawa 2022, again, identifying the lands as that sort of corner out of where the existing quarry is, which is outlined in red and shown as being highly disturbed. The zoning on the property is the environmental protection subzone 3, and most of the natural area, environment area or the burnt lands is zoned that EP3 zone. Quarry lands are zoned in ME zone. Next slide, please. This is just zoomed in from the same Geo-Ottawa and identifies again the subject land in the corner at March Road shows up as well as Burnt Lands Road. opposite the quarry. You can see that there is a black circle. What I've done is identify from the corner of the subject lands, sort of a radius of 500 meters, which is the identified area of influence under the provincial policy statement and the city's official plan, just to give some reference in terms of the where that 500 meters lies. And I just did it from the corner so that it wouldn't make the map too messy. So next slide, please. Sorry, just back one slide. Within that area, you can see that there are 4 existing houses on burnt land roads that lie within that 500 meters. Sorry, next slide. So I'll try and quickly go through some of the policies that we've had to deal with this particular application. Just a bit of background, the existing quarry has an agricultural resource license on it, and the applicant has filed for a license for these lands as well, and are well through the process in terms of addressing the issues and concerns. I'll let them speak to that. I believe they're speaking later. So the provincial planning statement identifies that we should be protecting the natural environment for both its diversity and connectivity, that we're to maintain, restore, and improve that natural environment, and that site alteration in habitat can only occur if it meets the test for the province and the federal government, depending on what the habitat is. Excuse me. It also notes that adjacent site alteration has to demonstrate that there's no negative impact. With the water resources section of the planning statement, the province seeks to protect both the ground and the surface water. And with the mineral aggregates, there's policies for the long-term protection of that resource. It also directs that we cannot consider supply and demand when we're doing evaluations for the planning merits of an application. It also identifies that we should be looking to minimize the impacts of the extraction on sensitive receptors such as houses. And finally, it does identify that with rehabilitation, it can be recognized as the long-term protection, enhancement, and restoration of natural features and systems. So that's sort of where the test that we have to look at in terms of evaluating whether or not a quarry in this circumstance can be supported or not. The province has identified to us that the area of natural and scientific interest that we currently have mapped and that the province currently still has mapped, it no longer exists or does not exist on the subject lands. It has been identified that there is significant woodlands as well as the western chorus frog, and those are the significant features that still exist on the property. And the province has recognized that with the rehabilitation of the quarry long-term, that those features can be reestablished on site. So that sort of leaves us in a position of the natural features. Some of them no longer exist or don't exist, and some of them can be reinstated. Next slide, please. So quickly going through the list of issues that we're dealing with. Sorry, just quickly note that our official plan also reflects a lot of the policies and requirements that the provincial planning statement has. So as I've identified, we have the issues with respect to the natural environment. It's an area of natural and scientific interest. It's known as the Burnt Lands Alvar. There's some significant woodlands and the habitat for the frog. Excuse me, frogs. The bedrock, I'll skip down to the water resources. So it has been identified or is identified that there is a small portion of 4200 March Road that lies within the Mississippi Mills source water protection area for the municipal wells in Almont. It's a vulnerability score of 2, and quarries don't represent a significant threat at that level of vulnerability. And our risk management official who deals with source water protection has processed the notifications needed under the Source Protection Act. With respect to the surface water will continue draining to the east through the settling ponds and into the long swamp. The private wells, they have indicated that the submissions from the applicant have indicated that they will not be impacting private wells, both in terms of drawdown for the taking of water for the quarry, as well as with respect to some of the other aspects of the quarry operation. The private wells are required to be through the licensing. It's our understanding anyway, that there will be monitoring proposed as part of the Aggregate Resources Act licensing. Likewise, with the surface water, there will be monitoring required for that. With respect to the traffic entrances, the routes and the volumes, they are not proposed to increase. They're not increasing the tonnage that's supposed to be coming off the site, and they will continue to use both their March road access and their Upper Dwyer Hill road access. I understand that there's issues with some of the background volume on those roads, but it's not a matter we can really address through this process. That's something else we would need to look at as a municipality. With respect to noise and vibrations, the applicant has filed studies with respect to the operating, the blasting, the dust, the noise. And those are all aspects that have to be monitored ongoing. And there's a complaints process also through the aggregate licensing. With respect to the bedrock resources overlay, we are supposed to be protecting the resource and mitigating impacts. The applicant has provided information that they can minimize and mitigate the impacts. It doesn't mean that they're completely removed in terms of impacts, but that's where that lays. Next slide, please. So just concluding things, staff are looking to recommend that we redesignate the site from green space to rural countryside, reflecting that the province does not recognize this as still being part of, or as being part of the area of natural and scientific interest. Along with that, then we would be also looking to remove the natural environment area and the natural heritage features overlay. And the natural heritage features overlay is the aspect that would be reinstated as part of the rehabilitation requirements under the licensing by the province. We would, however, keep the core area natural systems to reflect that long-term that is supposed to remain part of our natural system and should be rehabilitated to serve that function. And finally, we would add the bedrock resource overlay over this. Essentially, we're in a position that the province has recognized its the emphasis in terms of their direction is on the resource and the bedrock resource as opposed to the natural systems, and leaves us in a position of support for the application. And we would also therefore support the rezoning from the EB3 to the rural. It's not to RU, it's to mineral extraction. There's an error on my slide, sorry. That's all. I have other slides, but they're just for information if needed.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Now, we do have 10 speakers on the item today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let everyone know who's first and then who's coming up next, just to make sure we maintain a bit of a flow and respect everybody's time. So we're going to start first with John Blay, and Beverly Blay is registered as the second speaker following John. Just for a point of clarification, that committee's here to hear what you have to say, but there are no direct questions from delegates to staff, but members of the committee can pose questions following the delegations. Have a seat, sir, yes. I was gonna say Cheryl can be your IT woman for a moment there. All right, John, so you've got 5 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Eric members and everyone else that's here. I'd like to start by stating that I'm against this proposal. I'm urging you to decline it. And some of you may vote for the proposal, thinking that they generally follow everything the planning department recommends, and that that's not great, and or they want to avoid city legal costs in the future. Not a great reason either. Anyway, I must let you know that I live very close to it, and I'm certainly probably considered a NIMBY. But our house is only 125 meters away from the edge of this quarry. So that we'll have to endure all the blasting, the incredible noise from the conveyor belts and crushers, all the dust that comes up from the quarry. I would have to say that the planning department's report that I've read fairly quickly is, it just echoes the documentation submitted by Kavanaugh's consultants. And it's a master class in greenwashing and gaslighting. There's a few reasons why this expansion should be denied. Alvars are very rare. They're generally very biodiverse, and this property is, or was, before it was damaged, and it's only 50% damaged. Remember, if you look at the Geo-Ottawa images, there's still a lot of forested area on it, which is still considered part of the Alvar, believe it or not. Alvar woodlands are one of the reasons why it shouldn't never be designated as not part of the ANSI. Anyway, the property in question was purchased by Kavanaugh in 2013. Then it was long after it was designated EP3 and part of the ANSI, and the official plan showed it as green space. But shortly after purchasing it, Kavanaugh proceeded to damage it by building a shooting range for the Ottawa Police Service. The range was only used for a few years, and then somebody at City Hall, I guess, woke up to the fact that it was being egregiously violating the EP3 zoning. No penalty has ever been levied for this. That's a pretty poor reason for granting a zoning change that it's already damaged. That would be like rewarding a bank robber for not imposing a prison sentence and allowing them to keep all the loot. And then there's the dirty little secret about of the quarrying industry about fly rock. And Norma Moore, who's going to speak this morning, has personal experience about fly rock. And my concern is that fly rock can come from the quarry onto March Road, which is a very busy road now. What happens when it goes through the window of a school bus? You know, it could be a dangerous situation. Now, there's lots of myths and inaccuracies out there about this. We're disputing that there's
Just 1 more minute, John.
we're disputing that there's no Alvar there, or no endangered species. Rehabilitation is a bit of a myth. It's a joke. If the quarry has a lifetime of 100 years, and this one is going to be refilled with excess soil, that'll take another 100 years. So we're talking rehabilitation that may occur in 200 years. That's quite a while from now. Employment could be lost. The levels of employment in the aggregate industry are solely dependent on what contracts they have from the municipality mainly and developers. There's no, it's not the kind of impulsive purchase. So if one company doesn't have the contracts, the jobs will move to someone else who has them. So the employment is going to be determined strictly by how many contracts are out there and not necessarily by, anyway,
Now, John, your 5 minutes has elapsed, so can you?
yeah,
Up your
I'll wrap
comments?
it up quickly.
Thank you.
The province, in the planning document, the province is supposed to have it's supposed to look after the Aggregate Resources Act and make sure that it's adhered to. Well, there's a report from the Auditor General of Ontario in December of 2023 that disputed that. It said this is the MNRF is very underfunded. They don't have nearly enough inspectors or experienced inspectors. They don't ever give out any penalties for violations. So the aggregate industry, unlike other industries, is free to do whatever the heck they want. And anyway, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much, John. And are there any questions from our colleagues? Vice Chair, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for being here today, John. It's not lost on me that about 10 minutes after my name appeared publicly on the ballot, I got an email from you about this very matter. And so we've been discussing this for a long time and
Indeed.
come to your place, visited the area. And just by looking at that 500-meter area of influence, I can see visually that your property lies within that. How does the current operations of the quarry affect your life now?
There's quite a bit of noise from it. They have a series of conveyor belts that all kind of rumble, and there's, occasionally they'll have the crusher you can hear as well. So that's the impact. The trucking isn't so much of an issue. And there's some dust.
The quarry was there when you purchased your property.
Not that well. It was a small quarry. It's been there 70 years, which, reinforces my point that quarries have a long lifetime.
But the land surrounding it at the time would have been green space and
Exactly, yeah,
designated as
yeah,
such. And would
yeah.
you have purchased that property if you knew the land there was owned by the operator of the quarry and perhaps could one day be rezoned?
We had no idea. The quarry was a small quarry off of March Road and Dwyer Hill Road. Down in that corner, we're a long way from us. And over the years, it's expanded and got closer and closer. So this last expansion, though, was sort of the unthinkable.
And I know you've explained to me a couple of times, and this will be my last question to you, but if you could share with my colleagues some of the frustrations that you've shared with me in terms of your ability to use your own property versus the neighbor across the road.
Well, ours is zoned DP3 entirely. In some properties in this ward, the EP3 zoning is cut away around the where the ANSI has been cut away. The ANSI, by the way, was cut away along our road, but the zoning didn't follow that. The zoning is still EP3, so we're kind of limited in what we can do. However, it's kind of ironic that across the road, it would be an ME zone. And who knows how long the ME zone will continue to grow. Over the years, if all that area has been identified as bedrock resource overlay, then, what if the province sells up some of the park to, make more quarry space?
Thank you, John.
Just because they can.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Colleagues, any other questions for the delegate? Not seeing any. So John, thank you very much for coming out today. And we'll ask Beverly to come up next. And after Beverly is Ashley Struthers.
Good morning, everyone. The community group Friends of the Burnt Lands wishes to thank the councillors and members of the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee for the opportunity to introduce and share its video, Saving the Burnt Lands Alba. The video offers an opportunity for residents as well as non-residents of the area in question to become more aware of the endangered and protected flora and fauna that currently inhabit the Burnt Lands Provincial Park. It is also our sincere hope that the information shown in the video will have a visual impact as you deliberate over the request for a rezoning change. Should you have any questions after the viewing, John Blay would be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the video, please.
Welcome to the Burnt Lands Alvar. The aim of this video is to raise awareness of a unique and special part of our natural heritage and how it's again threatened by the gravel mining industry. The Burnt Lands, long regarded as unproductive scrubland, is now recognized for its superb biodiversity. Alvar is a Swedish word meaning a rare biological environment based on a limestone plain and covered with a mix of sparse grassland vegetation, forest and sometimes bare rock. Globally, alvars are found only in a few remote places in Europe and the Great Lakes region of North America. Almost 75% of these alvars are located in Ontario. Where is the Burnt Lands Alvar? It lies at the western extremity of Ottawa, our national capital. Roughly half of it lies in the neighboring municipality of Mississippi Mills. In 1983, the Ontario government designated the Burnt Lands Alvar as an area of natural and scientific interest of the life science type, often referred to as an ANSI. In the early 2000s, the province of Ontario combined 137 hectares leased from the Nature Conservancy of Canada with 386 hectares of Crown land to create the Burnt Lands Provincial Park. But over the years, the Alvar has also been slowly diminished, one piece at a time by commercial and residential development, parts rezoned for agricultural use, and 2 large quarries. The human species depends on biodiversity and a livable climate for its ultimate survival. The Burnt Lands Alvar supports 82 breeding bird species, 48 butterfly species, 98 species of owlet moths, and 57 different species of ground beetles, globally rare invertebrates, and countless varieties of vascular plants, mosses, and lichens. The other major challenge to human survival is capping the ever-increasing CO2 content of Earth's atmosphere. The Alvar's forested areas now contribute a much-needed carbon sink. Industries which exploit natural resources like petroleum, forestry, mining, and fisheries require strict government controls. The aggregate industry is no exception. Yet, as this industry argues for fewer controls, just the opposite is required. Currently, a local construction company which owns many other pits and quarries wants to expand its March Road quarry into yet another 18 hectares of the Burnt Lands Alvar. Also of concern are approximately 57 hectares of the Alvar, also owned by the same company. They claim that the high-quality aggregate needed to make concrete and asphalt is in short supply, and that this new expansion can supply it. This is not entirely true on both counts. But the company has applied to the City of Ottawa to change the zoning of the property from EP3, one that specifies the highest level of environmental protection, to ME, zoning that permits a quarry for mineral extraction. These applications were accompanied by copious documentation generated by high-priced consultants, all of it to show that there'd be no harm to the environment. This is simply greenwashing at its best. Estimates show the allowable maximum annual tonnage from all currently licensed pits and quarries in Ontario exceeds the actual demand by a factor of 13 times. Over the next 10 years, the Ontario government promises to facilitate the construction of 1.5 million new homes. Yet it's highly probable that currently licensed pits and quarries already contain an adequate 10-year supply. An up-to-date, independent study of the quantity and quality of aggregate resources in Ontario and an accurate forecast of the demand over the next 10 years is required. This is an urgent plea for help. We have only one environment. Let's choose preserving it over corporate competition and greed. In closing, let's heed a very wise Indigenous teaching about Mother Earth that says harvest only what you need.
Thank you very much. And we were just commenting up here. Very well done. Very well put together video. Are there any questions for either John or Beverly from our colleagues? Not seeing any. Well, thank you very much. Ashley, you're up next. Great. And following Ashley will be Norma Moore. So Ashley, you've got 5 minutes. You can just hit the green button or the microphone there, and thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, and good day, councillors and members of the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. So my name is Ashley Struthers, and I'm here as a member of the Friends of the Burnt Lands, which is a citizen group of members of the public who support preservation and protection of the Burnt Lands Alvar. And I oppose the application put forward by Thomas Kavanagh Construction Limited to expand the March Road quarry on 2 major grounds. So the first being that a need for more pits and quarries to produce aggregate has not been sufficiently established. And second, that approving the rezoning would not allow for the timely rehabilitation of the Alvar. And I'll take the next few minutes to speak to these concerns. So my first point about insufficient evidence of the need for more pits and quarries. Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources database currently shows that there's 112 licensed pits and quarries within the city of Ottawa, of which Kavanagh operates 14 within city limits and many more just in surrounding areas. In 2023, Ottawa's pits and quarries produced 9.7 million metric tons of aggregate, but as was mentioned in the video, these same pits and quarries are actually licensed to extract many, many more times that amount, which does not point to a need for more pits and quarries. There's also a lack of publicly available information on the supply remaining at these quarries, as well as information on Ottawa's current demand for more aggregate. So all of this leads to uncertainty about whether or not more quarries are needed. As noted in the report, it's not a requirement under the provincial policy statement for an applicant to demonstrate that there's a need to have their license approved, but that does not mean that it should not be an important consideration of this committee and its decision. And just because another site can be approved doesn't mean that it should. Important environmental protection should not be removed without solid justification, and it should include demonstrating a need. Now to speak to my second point, which is the potential for the rehabilitation and recovery of the Alvar. As we've seen through this great video put together by John and Bev, the Burnt Lands area has one of the most biodiverse and significant examples of Alvar in the province, and this is what has earned it its ANSI designation. And in zoning it as EP3 land, the city has afforded this site the highest form of protection that's available under the policies of the new official plan. Alvars are globally threatened by land fragmentation and development, and a designation like this should not be lightly overturned. As my colleagues have spoken to and will continue to speak to, the report provided to the committee notes that Alvar features are not present on the proposed expansion site. However, we know this finding is misleading because it does not account for the potential that it did previously exist on this site and could again. And approving rezoning on the basis that Alvar features are no longer present does send a message that previous contraventions don't matter, and it also ignores the potential for the Alvar site to recover following its rehabilitation. But this rehabilitation would need to happen immediately, not decades from now once the quarry has already been exhausted and irreversible damage has been done. What's left of the existing Alvar needs to be protected. Each rezoning approval carves up the Alvar into a patchwork. As we saw in the video, so many parts of the land have already been rezoned for other purposes. The ecosystem viability and the biodiversity is put at risk when this habitat becomes fragmented. It can't perform the functions that it's meant to perform. And even the most hardy species can't survive this. The cumulative impacts of such rezoning is like death by 1,000 cats. So, as a member of the Friends of the Burnt Lands, I recommend that the committee deny this project application and the rezoning due to the risk of harm to the surviving Alvar, as well as the unsubstantiated need for more aggregate to justify such harm. Denial of this application constitutes a reasonable and necessary action to uphold the protections for rare and sensitive species habitat. And at minimum, the committee should consider the cumulative impacts of such projects and undertake a thorough independent assessment of the need for more pits and quarries to meet the city's planned development, including exploring other readily available alternatives to meet demand before granting any further approvals. In closing, we believe that the Alvar's sustained vitality is at risk should this proposed project be approved, and that council has a responsibility to demonstrate need for the proposed project before approving measures that could cause serious and irreversible harm to important protected habitat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, with 16 seconds to spare. So are there any questions for the delegate? Go ahead, Chair, or Vice Chair.
First of all, thank you very much for your delegation. Very well done. I agree with you that supply should be a consideration when we make these decisions. And as you mentioned, that is part of a provincial policy statement. So just to reassure you that I and the other members of this committee regularly interact with provincial ministers and deputy ministers and go to conferences to address issues just like this. So I am committed to ensuring that conversation continues with the province and that we can make sure that we both protect the resources that we have and natural areas. And maybe we should think a little bit more about supply and whether or not we need to do that. So thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much, Ashley. I'll ask Norma Moore to come ahead up here, and following Norma, it is Grant Edgar. You'll just have to hit the button at the bottom there. That's right. There you go. Now you're live. Welcome.
Thank you. I wonder how many of you this morning have never heard of fly rock. Fly rock is, in fact, rock that is ejected from the blast site in a controlled explosion in a quarry operation. Rock that is propelled beyond the blast site, causing injuries or death to people or animals, damage to property at distances exceeding 1,000 meters, not 500. 1,000 meters, included in this consideration is the fact that the fly rock is moving at speeds of over 400 miles per hour. We've lived on the Braeside Ridge for over 50 years, adjacent to the Braeside Quarry, so we're very aware of blasting accidents, 4 that we know of. A mega blast in September 2005 did considerable structural damage to properties in the neighborhood. A fly rock incident in August 2007 caused major damage to a neighbor's home and property, an incident where the owner was almost killed. The fly rock had spewed across the busy road. I saw quarry workers frantically sweeping up all the rock that had landed on the pavement. Luckily, no cars were on the road at that instant. Even more lucky was the fact that a neighbor who usually took her 2 tots for a walk in a stroller at that time, that day did not. In another accident, fly rock fell on a neighboring business roof, and finally one on September 10th, 2021. Living adjacent to the quarry, we had received notification some weeks before that blasting would occur in the quarry that fall, 2021. I was working in my garden. Our property is about 6 acres, when I heard a warning beeping sound from the quarry. Thinking a blast was imminent, I sheltered behind a large oak tree until the blast had occurred. We had not received any notification that a blast would occur on that day. Then I went to the other side of our property where my husband had been during the blast, and he had heard no warning. Simply the blast, then a whistling sound, and finally something crashing into trees, like the sound of shrapnel. Naturally, we reported this to the government ministries involved. MOACP is responsible to deal with any spills outside the quarry site. They called the quarry owner, who said the blast was within the required parameters for vibration and noise. So no problem. MOECP did not look for fly rock, nor would they even interview the witness, my husband. At a team meeting of ND, MNRF, MOECP, and I, the MOECP representative said he wouldn't interview the witness, my husband, because his evidence was only hearsay, because he only heard the rock. He didn't actually see it. They took no photographs. They spoke to nobody else. They wouldn't look for fly rock. They did nothing. But ND, MNRF did investigate the quarry operation, discovered that the quarry had been in violation of its site plan for the previous 5 years. The quarry site plan is to be rigidly adhered to. The quarry had not been inspected in all that time, and there were major important violations. Despite the fact that this quarry had a history of blasting accidents, had been taken to an Ontario Municipal Board hearing and lost, this quarry still had not been inspected in 5 years. Apart from blasting accidents, we've suffered the negative effects of a portable asphalt plant in the quarry for 3 years. Poisonous fumes, incredible noise, and black dust prevented us from enjoying our outside property amenities, invading even our houses. Neighbors took the case to small claims court, where even though we won, the costs to us were high. There's continual fear that there will be a petrochemical spill in the quarry, contaminating, destroying the groundwater for the whole Braeside Ridge. Aggregate, well, that point has already been made.
Norma, your
No.
time is elapsed. If I can just get you to wrap up,
I
please.
will.
Thank you.
Quarries reduce neighboring property values at a considerable distance. Homes closest are often not saleable. The environment is exposed to noise, fugitive dust, toxic fumes, vibrations, and fly rock as long as the quarry remains operational. There is one example. Somebody has asked me, has anyone been killed? And I mentioned that our neighbor was almost killed. In Coboconk, Ontario, a man sitting in his living room was killed by a quarry rock, fly rock, coming through the window, the roof. So no one's saying we don't need aggregate, but what we do say is we need absolute, adequate supervision and setbacks large enough to protect human and animal life, property, groundwater, and air quality. Think very, very carefully about the dangers, and these are mortal dangers of this expansion before making a decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norma. Don't run away yet, Norma. You might have a question here.
Just a quick comma or a comment. I merged that word with your name. Thank you, Norma. Thank you for raising what you've raised. I do, it reminded me of an incident in my ward about a year ago or last fall, where some blasting occurred in conditions that I don't believe were ideal for blasting, and the result was complaints from across the ward, like homes kilometers and kilometers away from the quarry, calling my office to figure out what was going on, and so I'm happy you raised that, and I will be raising that with both city staff and the applicant later today. So thank you so much for your time and for the reminder.
I really think that it is important to realize that in these accidents, one, it was explainable, but the others were, no, it was an experienced blaster. He did everything by the book. Everything was right. The important thing to remember is these accidents, if you want to call it that, will still happen. There is no guarantee, and it has nothing to do with vibration and noise parameters that have been set. The accidents will always occur. And the only thing that is going to protect people and the environment is distance.
Thank you very much. Grant, you can come ahead down now, please. And following Grant is Ted Hendricks. All right, Grant, looks like your microphone's live, so 5 minutes, it's all you.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. So the proponent, Kavanaugh, has requested and the city planning department is supporting this request to formally remove the environmental protection from 18 hectares. The health and the vitality of the Alvar is important and worth protecting from encroachment from industry. And we are concerned about the apparent precedents that this would set for proponents' treatment of the protected lands if the proponent's treatment of the protected lands is rewarded rather than challenged. As stated in my original comments to the proposal some time ago, our community strongly, and I'm a member of the Friends of the Burnt Lands. I live on Burnt Lands Road myself, although I'm not immediately in proximity to the quarry as others on our team here have spoken to. But we commented earlier on the proposal as the opportunity was given to us to do so. And my comment was current EP3 zoning and ANSI designation is intended to protect the lands. Kavanaugh damaged the lands despite this EP3 zoning. Kavanaugh should be required to restore the lands to its original state, flora and fauna habitable state, and have them comply with that. The response that we received was not really to my satisfaction. It said Kavanaugh is not proposing to remove the Burnt Lands Alvar ANSI designation from the extension lands, but rather is recognizing rehabilitation as a means of demonstrating no negative impacts to the form and function of the ANSI as contemplated in the provincial policy statement and the city official plan. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this quarry. I mean, you saw a picture and some video of it earlier. When they're done blasting, there's going to be like a vertical wall of like 50 meters. I don't know what restitution or rehabilitation looks like, but it's going to take forever for that to look anything like it did up until it was damaged. So anyway, there's two problems with the response in my mind. Firstly, the response was suggested that we were concerned about the ANSI designation. However, our comment was specifically challenging the proposed change to the EP3 zoning. Secondly, the response was from the proponent, from what we could tell, and not from the city of Ottawa. And in my view, the comment was really directed at the city of Ottawa. The EP3 protected status was in place when Kavanaugh damaged the land in question. And as we've seen earlier, this is about 40% of the proposed expansion area that's been damaged already. The city planning report executive summary that we just received earlier this week or last week says the Alvar has been shown to not exist on the site, making the green space and NEA designation no longer appropriate. There's two problems with this statement. We don't agree with the assessment that the lands are not part of the Burnt Lands Alvar. We live on the Burnt Lands. We live on the Alvar. My property, which is a private property, is part of the Alvar. The quarry is part of the Alvar. It's not like you draw a line in the sand because of a planning designation, and that's not the Alvar. It's all part of the same forested area and not forested area. The other aspect of the assessment that we have challenge with is it's based on a current state assessment. When Kavanaugh presented their findings, we clearly challenged them on the statement that there's nothing living there. And we asked them, what were you assessing? They said the current state of the situation, meaning that they've gone and damaged the land and now nothing lives there. Well, of course, nothing lives there. They took a bulldozer to it. So we think that's a bit rich to say that nothing lives there and it's not part of the Alvar when they actually had a hand in destroying that. So rather than recognizing protected land as being damaged and ensuring that it's being restored, the city appears to be establishing a precedent for corporate behavior. The appearance of what's happening here is it appears that it's okay for an organization to damage protected lands that are clearly designated as such, then do an environmental study concluding that nothing's there because they damaged it, and then request that environmental protection be removed to support their commercial exploitation of the land. So, in conclusion, we respectfully request that the ARAC committee reject the proposal to change the zoning from environmental protection subzone 3 or EP3 to mineral extraction. We don't believe that's appropriate. And ideally, we would like the city to go further and request that the proponent restore the damaged EP3 lands to its natural state and encourage the return of natural flora and fauna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. Are there any questions for the delegate?
Thank you very much for coming, and your delegation was extremely clear and well thought out. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. I'll invite Ted down, and following Ted is Dan Mayo. All you, sir, and your microphone's live.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Hendricks. I retired from General Dynamics as a manufacturing engineer. And Kavanaugh, over the years, has been a good neighbor. They dug up my basement, put gravel in my driveway. My wife and I live on Burntlands Road for over 40 years. During those 40 years, we have lived with Kavanaugh's blasting, which has cracked our septic tank, our foundation. And I've also survived World War III with the police gunfire on the property. Now, as the quarry moves closer to the houses on Burntlands Road, things will only get worse. Now, water is an essential for life. 60% of our body is water, which is used by all organs to function efficiently. We have to rely on groundwater for our existence. We use it for drinking, washing, etc. Now, over 9 million people in Canada rely on groundwater. And 28.5% of these people live in Ontario. Experts have said that the draw on groundwater from this quarry expansion will be insignificant. If this new quarry goes below the water table, the water draw will be very significant. We draw our groundwater from a bedrock carbonate aquifer, namely limestone, which used to be an ancient sea, this whole area. Groundwater is a major link in the hydrological cycle. Groundwater circulates as part of a hydrological cycle. As precipitation, and other surface water sources recharge the groundwater, it drains steadily and sometimes very slowly towards its discharge point. When it appears above ground, this water runs off into lakes and rivers. The hydrologic cycle is a series of transformations that occur in the circulation of water from the atmosphere on the surface, and then the subsurface regions, and then back from the surface to the atmosphere. Precipitation becomes surface water and soil moisture and groundwater. Groundwater circulates back to the surface. From the surface of all water returns to atmospheric evaporation and transpiration, not transportation. Anyway, an asphalt plant is allowed to operate on this quarry. This could present a whole new problem for groundwater. A type of contaminant that is especially troublesome is a group of chemicals known as DNAPLs, which are dense, non-aqueous phase liquids. These chemicals are used in asphalt operations, notably TCE, which is trichoethylene. This chemical enters the groundwater through spills, and groundwater can dissolve some of the compounds in this volatile substance. Cleanup of these volatile substances is almost impossible when it enters the groundwater. In conclusion, the quality and quantity of our groundwater for ourselves and future generations should be protected. Governments have the responsibility to protect its citizens from harm and exploitation. My children, grandchildren deserve and expect that we preserve and protect our natural resources. Now, a lot of this information was gathered from Environment and Natural Resources of Canada. That's something I made up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ted. Well done. I'm not seeing any questions on the screen, but
One comment I
Vice
have
Chair.
to on this one. So thank you, Mr. Hendricks, for your delegation. I learned quite a bit. I will have to say that I haven't learned as much from you as I have from your wife, who I know is Mrs. Hendricks, who is my grade 1 and 2 teacher, and I appreciate you, you being here today and bringing her with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Hendricks. I'll ask Dan Mayo to come ahead down, and following Dan will be Ken McCrae. Morning, Dan. Morning. Dan, if you just turn your microphone on there, at the bottom, there's a button. There you go, sir.
There we go. Good morning. First of all, I should say I have no pecuniary interest to declare in this matter. And I'm not even a NIMBY neighbor. I live quite a few miles away, but I am a proud citizen of West Carleton Township, as it then was. So I wish to draw the committee's attention to 2 serious defects or omissions in the city planning report. And first, the report makes no mention of Kavanaugh's lengthy and serious record of convictions and non-compliance under various environmental statutes. I won't list them all. It would eat up more than my 5 minutes. I do have a list I can hand in. The problem here is that this omission from the planning report does not follow the legal precedents in this area. It's now well established, going back to a case of the Environmental Review Tribunal in 2009, so-called McCrae case, where the tribunal ruled that the past record of non-compliance was indeed a relevant factor in considering whether to give a proponent any approval or permit. So this is a shocking omission by the planners. It's established law that that's an important factor to consider. And it's now being followed in 3 cases, other cases. So these cases all had to do with provincial approvals. Well, I don't need to tell you, municipalities are creatures of the province. If it applies to provincial tribunals, provincial permits, provincial approvals, a fortiori, all the more it applies to municipal approvals. The second omission, again, I hate to criticize staff, but they do not mention the Auditor General's 2023 review of the aggregate industry, which is a horror show of non-compliance. Now, why is this relevant? Because the planners cheerfully state in their report, oh, well, if there's a problem with dealing with the neighbors and negative effects, the provincial conditions on their aggregate resource license, that'll take care of it. The Auditor General's report, there's no enforcement. And similarly with rehabilitation, there's no enforcement of these rehabilitation plans, according to the Auditor General. Plus, there isn't a person in this room that will be alive when this site gets rehabilitated, if ever. So, the question I have, what are the chances of a rogue operator in an unsupervised industry complying with any rules? The key quote from the 2009 decision of the tribunal said, What is the likelihood that the proponent is likely to commit further violations in the future? I noticed just last month, there was another Kavanaugh conviction. 6 natural gas lines were punctured by them. I'm sure the committee would be aware of that. So, you know, that's really what I've got to say. You have, you know, if the province isn't going to take care of the problem, you're our last line of defense, or perhaps our first line of defense here. You to put the scrutiny to these proponents, particularly this particular proponent. And don't roll. Please don't roll. Like, I know you're worried that they'll appeal. Fine, let them appeal, but you at least put up some resistance at this level. You know, make them work for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, so thank you very much for your delegation. And I'll ask Ken McCrae to come ahead down, and then Chuck Commando will follow Ken.
Good morning. And yes, I'm the McCrae that he referred to in that 2009 decision. Okay. In the report, it says the Alvar has been shown to not exist on site, making the green space and NEA no longer appropriate designations. I'd like to know who made that determination. Was it the province themselves who went out and did it, or was it a consultant that Kavanaugh paid for? Like, I've been on that site numerous times, and I've documented over 100 plant species different from the ones that Golder found. So that would indicate to me that the Golder Natural Environment Report is grossly insufficient. I found as well, in those plant species that I found on the site, several healthy black ash, which is designated in the Ontario Endangered Species Act as an endangered species. So I informed the MOE CP of that this week, and hopefully they'll do something about it. Now, the rehabilitation, what the heck chances there of any rehabilitation returning over like the 100 plant species plus that I found on the site and 100 plus species that Golder found on the site? What chances there of rehabilitation being made that will bring back those 200 plus plants on that site? Zero. Now, in the report, it says the OMNR have removed all objection to the ARA license, including the concerns with the ANSI. I haven't spoken with the MNR about this as yet, but it seems rather odd to me that they're making that statement. Kavanaugh bought the property on June 13th, 2013 for $450,000. The Google Earth satellite photo that I sent to you, dated August 23rd, 2012, shows no site alteration. The GeoOttawa 2014 aerial photo that I sent to you shows very significant site alteration on the property, including clear cutting of vegetation, road building, excavation of drainage ditches, and removal of earth materials. Like, the site alteration, I wrote to the city's bylaw enforcement department back in 2016 regarding that. And Don Angus, a bylaw enforcement officer, finally, after exchanging several emails with him, went out to the property and recognized that, yes, there is significant site alteration there, and directed Kavanaugh to remove their trailer from the site and stop their site alteration. But didn't do anything to cause them to rehabilitate the property. He said that there was the Provincial Offences Act didn't allow them to require that of Kavanaugh. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Also, the significant site alteration that occurred there, it's like it would take years to rehabilitate it.
Now, Mr. McCray, your time has elapsed, so I'll give you a few seconds to wrap up.
Yeah. There was also in a pond, like there is a wetland on the property, and it's there wasn't a pond there before, but there is now, and that's where Kavanaugh scraped away all the surface earth materials. And I found in there a newt as well as a salamander. So that's just a couple of other species. And anyway, I'll end it there. So I'm opposed to this.
No, thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yeah.
No questions, just a quick comment. It's nice to meet you in person. I think we've had several conversations by phone. I'm not sure if we ever have met in person. If we have, I apologize, and it's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Your email yesterday certainly generated some questions that I will have for the applicant and for city staff, and I printed off your email chain going all the way back to 2016. So this is obviously something you've been spending a lot of time looking at for many years. So thank you for being here, and I will make sure to answer or ask some of your questions later on.
35 plus years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. I'll ask Chuck to come down, and then Neil DeRuiter and Pierre Dufresne from Thomas Kavanaugh Construction are following Chuck's delegation. And I'm going to ask the vice chair to helm for a moment. Mr. Commanda, I'm being told you're online, so.
Yeah.
And I can see on my screen, so go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for not being able to make it in person, but they don't maintain the roads very well here in my little town in Quebec. And so I'll just start off by introducing myself. My name is Chuck Commanda. I'm an Algonquin from Kitigan, Zibi, and Anishinaabe, Quebec, which is about an hour and a half north of Ottawa. I reside now in I guess would be considered the National Capital Region. And I'm the grandson of world-renowned elder William Commanda. And my grandfather back in 2008 was the recipient, or he was appointed officer of the Order of Canada. And I'm here to give my Indigenous perspective of what's going on March Road. Okay, so like my grandfather, I'm here to speak for Mother Earth because she cannot speak for herself. It's also to help remind everyone, including ourselves, that in the medicine wheel, in the sacred medicine wheel, We are stewards of the land. We have been stewards of the land since time immemorial. And by taking care of the lands, we also take care of the waters. Now, under natural law, we have to remember one of the main parts of natural law was that we only harvest what we need. Always reminding ourselves, keeping in mind for the next 7 generations to come, and ensuring they're always taken care of. So I've done a bit of homework on this tract of land, and I found it to be, well, we have already established that it's a green space. But I also found out that it's home to many different animals, 4-legged, winged, insects, amphibians, fauna, flora. So now if we're allowed to go in there and then start changing the landscape, maybe destroying it, damaging it, where will all these animals and what this flora go? Where will they consider home now? And will they become a species at risk? And we have a word for that, and it's called Ginawe-Duganuk. And Ginawe-Duganuk, the English translation for that is the interconnectedness of all things, meaning that all things have a spirit. So my grandfather used to say that it doesn't matter how big, how small this thing is, this being is, it still has a spirit, and therefore it falls under that interconnectedness. And so I implore City Council and whoever is involved with the rezoning to consider not only the flora, but all these animals, insects, amphibians. And so that's pretty well all I had to say. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commando. Anyone have any questions? Not seeing any. Oh, yep. Councillor Luloff.
Mr. Commander, I just wanted to thank you for coming out and speaking today. Appreciate hearing your point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
It appears that's it, Mr. Commando, but thank you so much for your time today and for adding the perspective that you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Vice Chair. So I've got Neil and Pierre coming down here. Thank you, gentlemen. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Brown, members of committee. My name is Neil DeRuyter. I'm a planner with MHBC Planning. I'm joined by Pierre Dufresne from Kavanaugh Communities. Next slide, please. A lot of this has been touched on through Cheryl's presentation, but just as the summary, these applications for a quarry expansion were submitted in 2021. The lands in red are where the proposed quarry is located. The lands in yellow are the existing quarry. The Burnt Lands Provincial Park, which is identified in green, is immediately to the west. Next slide, please. There are no houses located immediately west, east, or south of the subject lands. Only one additional house would be located within the 500-meter quarry buffer area that we've discussed previously from the official plan. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the existing quarry itself. The quarry's been in operation since the 1960s. It's been part of the community for several decades. The tonnage limit at the site is 2 million tons, and the quarry's access through existing accesses off March Road and Upper Dwyer Hill Road. One of the things, just want to touch a bit about on the discussion on fly rock, and I want to make sure the committee is acutely aware that the examples that were provided is another quarry operator in another municipality. It's not reflective of the West Carleton quarry operated by Kavanaugh. And I think it's an important point to reflect that. Kavanaugh has no documented evidence of fly rock leaving the quarry at this site. This quarry produces high-quality concrete and asphalt stone that supplies the west end of Ottawa. Next slide, please. A little bit about the proposed operation, and I think it's important to note that there will be no increase in trucking or aggregate production. The tonnage limit that's currently in place at the quarry will remain the same, while the overall life of the quarry will certainly be extended by making additional resources available. The magnitude of extraction that would take place at the site would remain the same. The other thing I just want to point out, there is no asphalt plant at this quarry. There's no asphalt plant proposed at the quarry expansion. So just want to make sure very clear, the mention previously about asphalt plant, that is not part of the proposal and it's not located at the quarry. Next slide, please. A little bit about rehabilitation. The site is located within the city's natural heritage system. There are significant natural features located on the property, both woodlands as well as wetlands containing frog breeding habitat. The quarry has to be progressively rehabilitated in order to protect the natural heritage system and its features and functions. And there's really two ways this is occurring. One in the short term, and I'll get into it in a slide, where the existing quarry will be planted within 2 years of any site disturbance happening on the quarry expansion, and then on the long term on the quarry site itself. Next slide, please. So there's two figures here, and I apologize for the scale, but certainly all these detailed drawings have been included with the technical packages to the city. The one on the left is the rehabilitation plan for the proposed quarry expansion. The areas in green are areas that are going to be planted with trees. There's open meadow areas. There's going to be shrubs and thickets, which are located in the yellow shade, and then shoreline wetlands that will be located adjacent to the lake that will be created as part of the final rehabilitation for the quarry. Then the one on the right, and this is the rehabilitation activity that has to occur within 2 years of the quarry expansion being licensed. We've heard a lot of discussion today about when or if rehabilitation will ever occur. Part of this proposal includes opening up the existing quarry to undertake wetland and woodland planting immediately. In other words, so that areas are offset immediately, and then there's long-term rehabilitation that would occur on the quarry expansion lands. Next slide, please. I realize I have 50 seconds, so I'm gonna keep saying next slide, just to get to the very end here, if you don't mind. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. In closing, there are no outstanding technical comments or concerns. The Ministry of Natural Resources is responsible for making determinations of ALVAR. They've confirmed that there is no ALVAR, nor was there ALVAR present on the site previously. Kavanaugh's made substantial progress in resolving objections that were received through the Aggregate Resource Act process. They started with 59. That number is currently down to 4. As I noted, M&R has agreed that the rehabilitation plan can ensure that there's no negative impacts on the burnt lands, ALVAR, ANSI. I'd also note that the other provincial ministries have also signed off on the application, including Ontario Parks, who is the landowner immediately west of the proposed quarry expansion. In closing, Kavanaugh supports the recommendation that's before the committee to approve the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reuter, for being here. I know this has been on everyone's desk for a long, long time. And you've heard some concerns from residents today who live nearby, and some of which I share. And I'd like to talk to you about a few things. My first question is, when did Kavanaugh buy this particular piece of property?
Through the chair, my understanding, Councillor Kelly, is that Kavanaugh purchased the property in or around 2013.
And how was it zoned at the time?
Through the chair, I believe it was zoned EP3, which is the current zoning today.
Okay. And what was your plan for the property at the time?
I can't speak for what Kavanaugh's intents were purchasing it, but you know, I'm sure we
maybe
could,
Mr. Dufresne could.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, through the chair. That preceded my time at Kavanaugh. I imagine for a quarry.
Okay, so bought a piece of EP3 land for a quarry?
I'm speculating.
Okay. I'd love to get some clarification on that question if we could.
I can provide that.
Okay. And how did you use the land from 2013 until now?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, arrangements were made with the Ottawa Police Service to use portions of the site along with portions of the existing quarry for a shooting range.
Okay, and we keep hearing the term, the Alvar or area of significant influence is no longer there, is not there or no longer there. Can you speak to any alterations to the property that were made from 2013 until today?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, you know, based on looking at their photo and being on the site, roads were created, you know, materials were stockpiled. Certainly there were activities related to the police service using these lands. You know, I can tell you through the application process, one of the comments that we got in quite large numbers was the police's use of this property for a shooting range. So Kavanaugh did ask the police service to vacate the quarry, so that did occur in 2022.
Okay. Are you confident that between 2013 and now that no alterations were made to the property that would have affected its natural heritage features or significance as green space or something of that nature?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, as a planner, I wouldn't want to be put into that position about making a determination of whether or not significant features were removed. There was an environmental impact study done by qualified ecologists, and I would also say that Ministry of Natural Resources has been on the site several times in the determination on no Alvar features being present. That determination was not just a moment in time, but it was also reflecting previous conditions of the site. One of the important factors with Alvar, in my understanding of what makes it so significant, is that it's features that thrive when there's very little soil over bare limestone. In the case of the property, there's quite a bit of soil on top of the rock, which is one of the distinguishing factors that I know M&R made in their determination that there's no Alvar vegetation on site.
Okay, I also heard you talk, I may have missed some of it because I did have to run to the bathroom at the beginning of your presentation. Talk about rehabilitation. So we've heard some questions about that today and the length that it takes. You've presented something that I think is a lot different than what most of us think of in terms of speed of rehabilitation of these sorts of projects. So 2 years after, let's say the expansion is approved, you're saying that 2 years after that, you are going to be starting rehabilitation on the other part of the quarry. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, essentially that is correct. So one of the key factors in going through the rehabilitation plans was an understanding if we relied on the quarry expansion property itself, it would have to be long-term. There's no doubt about it. We're talking a couple decades of extraction occurring on that property. So in order to meet the requirements, both the city's policies and the province's policies, we have to look at completing rehabilitation as quickly as possible. So what that mean was looking at ways to incorporate rehabilitation plantings and landform creation on the existing quarry. The benefit with the existing quarry is there's a large setback area that won't be extracted that can accommodate new forest habitat, wetland for the chorus frog, as well as Alvar species management along the boundary between the provincial park. So that condition that's put on the site plan is within 2 years of the quarry expansion being issued. So in my perspective, I would certainly consider 2 years to be the short term.
Okay. And do you have any, or does the applicant have any previous, expansions or projects of this nature that they could point to in terms of rehabilitation and a track record of that? Like, is there a project in the region that we could look to see what rehabilitation looks like?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, what I will do is ask Kavanaugh to provide that information. Certainly, this is not their only site in Ottawa or in Eastern Ontario. The requirements for rehabilitation have certainly been strengthened over the recent years. But certainly we'd be happy to provide some examples of that.
And I think something that might be comforting to residents, certainly around these pits and quarries, because of the long timeline on full rehabilitation and what that even looks like. And one of our delegates today, I think, made the good point that none of us will be alive when this entire process is wrapped up. how is this paid for? How is the rehabilitation paid for? Is there revenue put aside from this actual operation to pay for rehabilitation? Is it in the business plan? Is there something that we could, or that you could point to show residents that you're taking this seriously, that money's being put aside?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, I can't speak for Kavanaugh's sort of financial and budgeting, but what I can say is the significance has been placed as a condition on the site plan, making it legally enforceable. The other aspect of it too is there is a rehabilitation security trust through the Aggregate Resources Act. So every ton of rock that's extracted in Ontario pays into the trust fund. One of the other things that I didn't have a chance to get through in my presentation that's related to this is there's been extensive consultation with the Indigenous communities. So there's 6 communities in total, and what I would say specifically, and this gets to some of the comments with respect to the Auditor General's report, right? And the questions about MNR's track record and ability to enforce these sites. Through that work, both the Algonquins of Ontario and Pikwakanagan developed the rehabilitation plan in conjunction with Kavanaugh. They will use field monitors to assist with ensuring that the work that's being or is planned to be undertaken on the site plan is being undertaken the way it should. So I just want to make sure that that point is known to the committee.
And perhaps Mr. DeFrank could speak to whether or not there's, a part of the business plan that would pay for this.
Yes, it's anticipated. It's going to be a cost. And just to add on to Mr. DeRuiter's comments, we've gone further with the Indigenous groups and signed, I'm not going to say legal agreements, but committed letters of understanding about our relationship and their participation of oversight.
Thank you. My final point or question or whatever it is around some of so we heard about fly rock and some distances to homes. We've also heard a little bit about, company track record. I did tell one of the delegates that I would raise this, and I'm sure, Pierre, you remember this day. So we started receiving calls in the office from dozens of people about, ground shaking and I think all the way out to like Dunrobin, this was happening. And we got communication from Kavanaugh saying that it did occur, and I'm sure it was at this pit. It was definitely Kavanaugh. So we were told that we'll have seismic records tomorrow. Our guys concede the weather was not best time to do it, but it takes weeks to set up, so they decided to proceed. I'm not sure that leaves a lot of comfort for the people who live in the surrounding areas when they hear that, yeah, we concede that the conditions weren't great for this, but we decided to go ahead anyway because it takes a couple of weeks to set up. I'm not sure that's what people want to hear when we're having these conversations.
I believe I sent that email to you, Councillor, or to your office. There was a lot of confusion over exactly what was going on that day and what the source of the disturbance was, whether it was indeed from that quarry or not. And then it fell off. I never heard anything about it again. So I'm going to assume that whatever questions are outstanding are answered. If not, I can go back and provide you whatever information is required about that incident, but still question whether that disturbance was from our site indeed. Is how I last recall it.
Okay.
And just further to the comments about convictions to Kavanaugh, there's never been any type of conviction in the operation of the West Carleton Quarry.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to go there. This is the one experience that I did want to highlight and ask some questions on because, deciding to go ahead even when we know the weather conditions are not ideal, then that might have an effect on the people around you. Again, I think it's.
I can look into that with our health and safety people, Councillor, and make sure that there's a protocol that's set up to address that.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you both very much for your time today, and I have no further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Lulaf.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to return to the issue of fly rock. We heard quite a bit about that from residents living in the area. Can you speak a little bit? I don't know if you're best placed to speak to this. Perhaps if there's another delegation from the proponent, but can you speak a little bit to the prevalence of fly rock, the mitigation methods that you have in place for that, prevention, that sort of thing? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Luloff, certainly under the, the starting point under the Aggregate Resource Act is that fly rock can't leave the site. So measures have to be taken to ensure that that doesn't happen. The other part of it is that it is considered a contaminant under the Environmental Protection Act, so you could be liable then to be charged through the EPA. As part of the work on this expansion application, there was a blast impact study prepared, and they look at techniques to help mitigate fly rock. So Councillor Luloff, some of the key things that my understanding have been incorporated are the direction in which extraction occurs or the blasting occurs. So you're essentially retreating towards the residents to minimize that. And then there's certain equipment that can be used, my understanding at quarries with respect to tarping to limit that from occurring. Certainly, the size and the diameter of the blast holes and all the stuff that goes into the planning for that is a key determining factor for it. I would like to say, I think in this case, the track records at the existing quarry where blasting occurs, right? We're not, Kavanaugh, from what I've been advised, has not been seeing fly rock leave the site. I think the parameters that will continue to be in place in terms of the blast monitoring and the requirements for how sites, how it's drilled, et cetera, will continue to be maintained with this new land.
So you feel comfortable saying that, should this be approved and work does begin on this site, that fly rock will not leave the site and will not be an issue?
Through the chair to Councillor Luloff, certainly that's been the recommendation of the blasting expert, is that fly rock won't leave the site as a result of the mitigation that's been put in place on the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. There were some suggestions made that this is more of a want to have than a need to have based on current supply demand. So I just wanted to hear from you on that.
Through the chair to Councillor Kitts. Yes, certainly, appreciate that there are lots of pits and quarries within the city of Ottawa. Not every pit or quarry is the same, though. It doesn't supply the same material. What I would say, and certainly from the planning perspective, and Cheryl mentioned this, where we start is that there is a provincial interest in making aggregate available. That's then reflected in the policy that states that demonstration of needs not required. But what I would say to kind of drill down to specifically for Kavanaugh in this case, we're talking about a quarry that's been in operation for several decades, and certainly from Kavanaugh's business needs, my understanding is it produces some of the highest quality materials that they have available in Ottawa, specifically for the production of asphalt and concrete, and to serve growing areas of Ottawa. This will just allow them to continue to serve that area. Certainly with having the infrastructure already in place, they already have the plant that processes the equipment. The machinery and equipment are there. The haul routes already established. We're on truck routes. I would say that's kind of where the need for Kavanaugh comes into place with respect to this specific piece of property.
If I may just add on to that, as Mrs. DeRuiter mentioned, this is very, very good rock for asphalt concrete. This quarry supplies many of our residential communities where we're building subdivisions for ourselves and for others, and also municipal projects. I can speak at length on inputs into the cost of housing, as I've often done when you're deliberating official plans and so on and so forth. So it's that cost effectiveness and quality and location of this plant that makes it better than perhaps other areas. So although there might be other alternatives, they may not be as feasible to mine.
Okay, thank you for that. And if this OPA is granted, what could we expect to see on that site in the sort of, what's your plan, I guess, for the site? Is there current capacity at the current pit that you would still be using? And this is sort of, would come into play later on, or would there be a mobilization of the site sort of like in the near future?
Through the chair to Councillor Kitts. So my understanding is, I should say if the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were approved, Kavanaugh still requires a license from the Ministry of Natural Resources. So there's still that process, although it is going towards the end of that process. My understanding is that what they call the first or second lift of this site presents the highest quality materials, so that there would be, I believe, an intent to extract that. There's also been some timing restrictions put in place for both the existing quarry and the expansion, that as that material is extracted, then that rehabilitation at the existing quarry is occurring, and some phasing, so that essentially what ministry wants to ensure happening is you're not just creating a bigger disturbed area, right? A bigger opening area. But my understanding is it's not like this would sit idle or vacant for 2 decades in terms of the expansion lands, that Kavanaugh would, after if the license is granted, would be moving into that site fairly quickly after that.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. A couple of questions for me. In your presentation, you indicated that the objections that were made, I think it was 59, and you've been able to resolve those down to all but 4. Can you describe that process to us? How are these objections received? And then how does the applicant go forward with resolving those to the satisfaction of the ministry?
Yes, thanks, Chair Brown. So the process under the Aggregate Resource Act is that you essentially reach out, notify the community, and then, members of the community and review agencies are given the ability to provide comments. Any comments received by the applicant, they then have a responsibility to what's called attempt to address those comments. In this case, typically what it included was, further meetings and discussion with the residents. I would say the big aspect was the changes made to the application. I've included a slide within the PowerPoint presentation highlighting some of the key ones. And so then that information is then put back out to the public and the agencies, and each of them are then given a chance whether or not they want to maintain an objection. So basically what we put in front of them is, these were your concerns, here's how we've attempted to address them. And then they have an ability to say, yes, well, I think this is addressed, or no, I don't think that's addressed. So when we talk about the 59 to the 4 in simple terms, we started with 59 comments under the Aggregate Resource Act. Through that process, it's now down to 4 members of the public who've maintained their objections to the quarry application. So I can tell you, in working on Aggregate Resource Act applications across Ontario, that's a significant reduction. And, there's different factors for why someone may or may not choose to maintain an objection. But, certainly I think the application review process in this case worked the way it's intended to, right? You hear concerns, you meet with people, you come up with changes to try to address those concerns. So that just kind of a summary of kind of how we got from the 59 to 4.
Thank you very much, and that's helpful. And I ask because you folks are the experts, and I'd like to know now, when we're looking to resolve many of these objections, obviously it's all done with the ministry overseeing the process. It's through the province, it's a provincial act. What were some of the comments that the different ministerial organizations had that you had to resolve?
Through you, Chair, I would say there was a wide variety of comments with respect to specifically the Alvar and the area of natural and scientific interest. And I should note that Ministry of Natural Resources did initially object to this application on that basis. I'd also state that Ontario Parks, right, as an adjacent landowner, also had questions and concerns about how this would impact their lands, and certainly the functions of the Burnt Lands Provincial Park. The Federal Department of Environment and Climate Change was also involved, as they had questions with respect to impacts on migratory birds. Then I would also say the Ministry of Environment, they look at it, there's kind of 3 different areas they're responsible for: species at risk, groundwater, and surface water. Hydrogeology was a big one here with respect to what we call the drawdown of the water table as water's pumped to extract bedrock. So that was one in which, specific plans have been put in place to address how that's monitored and mitigated. So I think, the important thing here is that agency review process really resulted in, not just having all the ministries sign off on the application, but also a plan on the site plan that's reflective of that additional mitigation that's been put in place, right? With the goal of ensuring that, as an example, that there's no impacts on private water supply. And you know, certainly just to throw wells as the example, like every private well in Ontario is protected under the Ontario Water Resources Act, right? So anything that Kavanaugh does at this site that may impact that, they're then liable for. So the plans and the review process have really ensured that, you know, as an item like wells are protected from any activities that would occur at this site.
Thank you. One more question about the objections. Were the majority of the objections initially received from government agencies or members of the community or the public?
Through the chair, the vast majority were members of the public. If I had to guess, I think we initially had probably 4 or 5 objections from agencies. That includes the city. I mean, your staff initially objected to the application, which I should have mentioned as well, to give credit to Cheryl and the city's team as well, because they also looked at it through very different lenses as well, and under hydrogeology and environmental planning, land use planning, source water protection, the things that Cheryl mentioned. So the short answer is the majority were members of the public.
Thank you. Now, moving to more of the environmental side, and I preface my comments with, I soon will have a controversial application coming forward in my ward, and always environment is top of mind. So I understand that we've already gone through this a little bit, but I'm looking for more detail on how we're going to remediate, what the plan is, and how that's going to be reported to the public. Because I think transparency here is important. We want to make sure that not only do we take your comments at face value today, but we want to make sure that we see those results as a community as quickly as possible. So is there more of a detailed scope that you could provide to us as to how the remediation is undertaken and what those steps are?
Yes, through the chair, the way I can best explain it is when the site gets ready for extraction, sort of the layer on top and the vegetation is removed, right? And so what has to happen with respect to the features that are currently on the property is essentially all the soils and seed banks then go to the respective areas within the existing quarry where those features will be planted. So whether it's the wetland habitat for the chorus frog or the trees for the new forest areas. So essentially you're salvaging those soils. And, you know, back to what Councillor Kelly asked about, you know, the demonstrated experience. This is something that is happening across Ontario. You know, soil can be transported and reused. The key is to ensure that it's occurring sort of immediately, and that's what's been put in the plan. With the timing of creating those features on the existing quarry within 2 years, certainly the transparency and while this is fresh in everyone's mind will be there, right? So the ability to document. There are plans that require reporting as to how it's going, right? So it's not just throw the seeds there and walk away. There are specific requirements, how many trees need to be planted, what wetland species types are incorporated, all this stuff that we worked on through with the Algonquin communities, so that all of that's then documented in a report. And certainly the idea here is to show how that's happening, right? Both for the public, but also for the city, for the agencies. You know, the Algonquins will also be present as part of that as monitors, observing the work that's being undertaken to provide input in their recommendations. So the idea here is not to park this away and back half of the site, don't worry about it. I think there is an idea here that transparency is critical and to show how this is working. My perspective, you know, this is what the rehabilitation plan policies and the PPS and your official plan are really intended to see as an outcome, right? And it would be good to show how that's working, right? And I think so I think the point is very well taken on the transparency and ensuring that everybody can see what's happening with those plans.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm not seeing any further questions for the delegation. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming out today. We're going to move to questions to staff. Cheryl's been patiently waiting. Colleagues, are there questions for staff? Vice Chair, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know we've heard a few times today, and it's not lost on me that the shift from the highest level of protection to a mineral extraction seems very drastic for people in the surrounding area. Has the city ever rezoned a property from EP3 to mineral extraction before?
I'm not aware of any situation in the city of Ottawa where we have done that.
Okay, so this would be a new thing. And I know last term there was a expansion proposal that was declined by council. It was sent to the OLT and was overturned on appeal. What's different about this one?
This one has the layers of protection in the official plan with respect to the natural environment. And in this particular case, there's actually residents closer. The other situation was for a pit, which has a smaller area of influence as well.
Okay, so there is, and this question might be more for legal. Is there a precedent here? Like if we were to decline this and it went to the OLT, they wouldn't be able to look at that last one and say, we're just gonna do what we did last time, because this is a material difference in the application, given the zoning of the property.
Chair, I can't really speak to what the OLT would look at in terms of any past cases, but the OLT does look at development applications on a case-by-case basis. So.
Okay, thank you. Has the city ever approved an official plan amendment to remove designated green space from that designation?
I'm not aware of any specifics. I know that there are areas where that might have happened with respect to some reevaluation of provincially significant wetlands that happened over the past while. With respect to things like Goulburn wetlands, that may have been the case, but I can't say for sure.
And so in your professional opinion, what has changed that makes this area no longer part of that natural environment area? Is it simply the letter we got from the province?
Not just the letter, the reports that were filed by Kavanaugh, the province's review of that, and city staff's review of those, as well as culminating with the province saying that it's not Alvar, not ANSI.
Okay. And the report mentions no negative impact on the natural systems and features over the long term. So I've got a couple of questions on that. So one is, how long is the long term? And in the short term, when a natural environment area is dug up or bulldozed or has machines running on it for 12 hours a day, I'm wondering how that's not impacting the natural systems that were in place before this change. And I'm kind of thinking, like, by that logic, Mr. Blake could take a bulldozer to his property and then approach the province and say it's no longer EP3.
Just trying to decide where to start here. So with the long term isn't specifically defined, but in the policies of the province, it does identify essentially quarries are considered an interim use. We know quarries have long lifespans, 50, 100 years potentially. So that to me is what they are saying is long-term.
Yes, my comment to that would be that's pretty difficult for the average person to wrap their head around. And I know it's, again, this is something that I'm going to tie into the discussion we had on Monday as a joint committee in terms of the comprehensive zoning bylaw changes that we're updating to enforce the official plan. It seems that it will create a situation where farmers or property owners who have owned these properties for generations can't build a dwelling on their property or sever them to retire because of the proximity to the aggregate extraction area and the zone of influence. I know that there's an area in West Carleton on Moores Road where this is already happening. And so I'm just, again, wondering how it is that aggregate operators can expand towards private land, but we're going to institute bylaws that are going to prohibit people from doing the opposite of that. And I guess, I don't know if there's a question here, but are we protecting aggregate that isn't really required based on what we have in supply over protecting people's property surrounding that?
I guess I would have to say we're trying to balance that. quarry expansions need to file the requisite studies to demonstrate they mitigate impacts. If a landowner in that area of influence identified in the provincial planning statement of the 500 meters wishes to sever or to build, they also would need to demonstrate that by doing so, they can do so safely for their own development, but also that they won't further restrict the ability of the pit or quarry, or the quarry, if it's 500 meters from the quarry, to expand to the full extent of their license.
Provincial policy statement, section 4.5.2.2. Extraction shall be undertaken in a manner which minimizes social, economic, and environmental impacts. And I'm wondering, beyond their rehabilitation plan, which is very long-term, we've heard some short-term steps that will be taken. But beyond that, what has the applicant done, in your opinion, to show that they will be minimizing the impacts, specifically the impacts to the neighbors in this area?
I'll start with the groundwater. They've done the hydrogeological studies, looked at potential drawdowns. They're also proposing some monitoring wells and long-term monitoring of those residential wells. They have shown with their hydrogeological study that there is minimal impact or minimal potential impact on the groundwater in terms of the private wells. With respect to traffic, we've already heard that the haul route will remain the same. The volumes of trucks will remain essentially the same. The background traffic on March Road and Upper Dwyer Hill is another additional concern that can't really be dealt with by the quarry operator. With respect to the noise and the vibration, dust and the fly rock has been mentioned. Kavanaugh has submitted the studies that demonstrate they can mitigate those impacts and contain those nuisances on site, and that the residential properties should not be further impacted by the expansion of the quarry. And those are things that we look at in terms of the social economic impacts.
Thank you. My last question, Chair. So further to that, and we've heard Mr. DeRuyter talk about well and aquifer protection and who's responsible for that. And I won't try and quote him because I don't remember exactly what he said, but he indicated there were clauses within, I believe, provincial legislation that talks about that wellhead protection. But I mean, if there was ever an incident, and this is something I'm hearing about on other files in my ward, if there ever was an incident and something did happen to the aquifer, what can be done at that point? Like what happens when the water table is broken?
As a non-hydrogeologist, I'll give a planning answer. My understanding is that the quarry operator is responsible for fixing, either rehabilitating the groundwater, supplying new water supplies to the impacted properties. Also, my understanding is that, for example, the Almont wells, Mississippi Mills wells, extend into the Nepean Aquifer, which is considered somewhat isolated from where the quarry, the aquifer that is being extracted for the quarry. So there is that sort of natural, a bit of a natural layer of protection as well. And, going forward, if there was an incident and some of the upper aquifers were contaminated, I'm not sure what the direction of the ground flow is, but perhaps there's opportunities to drill to deeper wells.
Sorry, this is actually my last question, might be for legal. That scenario that she just described, does that then become a legal dispute between a private property owner and the operator of the quarry? Or like, would there be a drawn out legal process there where there'd be an opportunity to try and prove that they are not responsible for the damage to the aquifer? And then further to that, when that is done, what is the legal recourse that landowners would have If something did happen, is there a tribunal they go to, or is it just a private legal matter at that point?
Mr. Chair, any question with respect to the private well system and the aquifers would have to be addressed through the province, and the province would get involved at that point on behalf of the landowners.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say to all the delegations that you were excellent. I know I didn't have any questions for you, but I thought your presentations were all very good, and I'm still blown away by that video. So whoever produced that, congratulations. I definitely sympathize for those that live in close proximity to the site, and I can appreciate that it feels perhaps a bit David versus Goliath. And for the benefits of the delegates and anyone who may be impacted, I just wanted to share, when I started in this role, perhaps naively, I didn't fully appreciate how at the mercy the municipality is to the province. And in this case, it does feel like the province has kind of made up its mind about unlocking aggregate lands. So my question is to legal. Should this committee vote against the recommendation, how do you see things playing? I know you already said that case by case basis and you can't fully speculate, but what's your opinion?
So Ms. McWilliams and I have been on these matters at the previous Ontario Municipal Board. And so it can go a variety of ways. And in some instances, the province will come forward and make statements or comments, taking a position. In some instances, they do not. That doesn't remove them from the process. And the tribunal does have to have regard to what the province has stated in terms of their licensing, whether a license has been granted. They will look at what a municipality needs to review in terms of the jurisdiction under the Planning Act for the zoning, as opposed to the jurisdiction that remains in the hands of the province, which is the issuance of the license with respect to the expansion. And so while it is a balance, the province's authority with respect to the expansion of a quarry is paramount in these types of instances. They have identified these as areas of protection in terms of ensuring that a quarry is able to continue and expand. So I can't give you an outcome, but there is sort of a delineation between the municipal jurisdiction on looking at what's appropriate from a zoning perspective under Section 34 of the Planning Act, and looking at the documentation that supports the expansion of the quarry, which includes the provincial approvals at this point.
In this case, we have our planning staff recommending approval. So that would also be taken into consideration of what is under our purview.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Certainly the planning analysis has occurred and staff have provided a recommendation, which is before you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you very much. Throughout some of the delegations from residents, we heard quite a bit about things like property damage and the risk of flying rock. What sort of role does the city play should there be damage to property or private property or persons because of these sorts of issues? What risk does the city carry in approving this should these sorts of incidents occur?
Mr. Chair, the city can only look at the application that is before us, which is a consideration of zoning and land use, and ensuring that the appropriate mitigation and protections that it has the authority to impose have been imposed and implemented in any decision that it makes in approving the zoning application. With respect to matters between private property owners, that in and of itself would be more of a private nature, in the same way that one property owner cannot impact the the land of an adjacent neighbor. That said, given the fact that this is a quarry and is under provincial licensing approval, the province would be the ultimate responsibility as to whether the appropriate protections that the quarry has said it will take in getting its expansion approved, that has been undertaken. And so it would be the provincial responsibility, in my opinion, and not a city responsibility in approving the land use.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And I've got a few questions. Going back to what the last delegate said, originally the city objected to the application, and now the recommendation before us from planning staff is to accept the rationale that you've listed here. What changed?
The status of the Alvar of the ANSI. At the time of the initial commenting period, we did not have comment back from MNRF on the status of the Alvar and the ANSI on this particular land. When we did get that, we withdrew our objection or didn't proceed with an objection, and the other matters were also being processed in terms of looking at things like the groundwater, surface water, the source water protection issues. They were also in the process of being addressed as well. But the biggest stumbling block and objection initially was the status of the ANSI.
Thank you. And piggybacking on a comment that Councillor Kitts made, I don't think it's evident to many who run for any municipal council in Ontario, choose my words carefully, just how tightly tied we are to the province and the decisions it makes. Quite often we state that municipalities are children of the province, and they tell us how we're going to do, what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, and how quickly we're going to do it. And there's a sliver of leeway or flexibility that we're often left with as to how to accomplish the goals of the province. And we don't have to look much further than the previous changes to the Planning Act last year, the year before. There was, I think, 6 changes within a very short time frame. So we are always playing catch up. With respect to the provincial responsibility and the municipal responsibility as it lies today, what are we approving and what is the province likely to approve? And I'm looking for a clear delineation as to our realm of responsibility and that which rests with the province. And Ms. Enta spoke briefly to that a few minutes ago.
So we are looking strictly at our official plan and zoning bylaw. With respect to compliance, consistency with matters of provincial interest, in this case expressed through the provincial planning statement and the direction from the province on those matters. And the direction we've received is no ANSI quarry or bedrock resources are available here and can be quarried. So the official plan and zoning bylaw would identify in the city's planning documents what the intended land use is and that range of use permitted uses are. The province's licensing, they can, my understanding is, I'm not an expert again, they can issue a license despite what we may say. Certainly if it's in our planning documents, anyone looking to move into that area or develop within that area would be aware then that the quarry is, the licensed quarry is within that vicinity as identified in our planning documents. Not sure if that answers you or not, but.
No, certainly it's appreciated. And Councillor Kelly made a comment during his remarks about a previous file that was dropped, and it was in my ward, and it was for a use that is less severe than this one. And the previous council stood with the residents of my ward and refused the application, and the city was unable to find a private entity that would be able to represent us because even they knew that it wouldn't stand up in an OLT tribunal hearing, which was devastating for the community and a challenge for us in our first or second meeting of council. If we refuse this application, and Cheryl, you just touched on, if we refuse this application, province can still move forward with licensing of the applicant. Do we have recourse, or perhaps that's a better question for Ms. Enta?
Certainly, council can make a decision on the application that is before it, which is the zoning and the official plan amendment. A refusal would require a planning rationale to be presented. Certainly, that could pose a challenge in obtaining a planning rationale from an external planner to be able to support a refusal of the application before the tribunal.
And we don't have that rationale right now. Is that my understanding?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Rationale, if a refusal was carried at council, would need to be provided by the end of that council meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to check with my colleagues to make sure that there are no other questions for staff before we move to the vote. Not seeing any.
Maybe I could just
Sorry.
provide a few
Yeah, absolutely.
wrap-up
Sorry,
remarks.
go ahead.
No problem, Chair. You got a busy job. Appreciate the discussion today and all the delegates who have come out. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, this has been a file that's been on my desk since before I was elected. And the first two people I ever met with as a candidate are in this room today. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time and waiting for an answer from the province and waiting to see when we would be here today to make this decision. And I think it's a drastic change for the surrounding community. The EP3 zoning to mineral extraction for me and the members of my community is hard to swallow. People are very concerned with the possible negative effects on their property and what that would mean for them and their quality of life and their future on their land. And it does feel to me that we are prioritizing aggregate that we don't currently have a need for over the surrounding area and property owners. And for me, hearing that this scenario is slightly different in the sense of what we're trying to change here today from the last one, it would definitely be my desire to have another look at this and perhaps decline it and test what we have in terms of a case. But I will leave that decision to my colleagues. I want to thank legal staff and all the staff who are here today. Cheryl, thank you very much for your work on this and taking the time to answer all of my questions throughout the process. And yeah, I will be voting against this and will leave the decision to my colleagues as to whether or not they do that. But would urge everyone to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Luloff, you have your hand up.
I do. I'm very sensitive to what we heard from residents today. They make a very, very good case. Knowing that Councillor Kelly will be voting against this, regardless of how the vote goes today, that will mean that it does not end up in a bulk consent agenda. And there is an opportunity for this to be discussed at full council, which I think is going to be important. While I am satisfied by what I heard from the proponent and from staff today, I do think that there should be a deeper conversation here. You know, the rights of private property owners should be first and foremost here. I do not like hearing that people are seeing damage to their property because of an adjacent owner and their activities. So I look forward to a deeper conversation once we get to council and continued conversation with my colleague. I'll go into that conversation certainly with a deeper understanding of this local issue and from what I heard today. So I just wanted to thank all of the delegates for coming out, and I'll echo my colleagues' comment that that was probably the best produced video that we've seen at ARAC, and did a very good job explaining some of the issues that are being faced in this area. I'd also like to thank every delegate that came out today. This is a very contentious issue, and you came here and made your points very respectfully, which does not always happen, is not always the case. There were no props, there were no singing, no guitars, no things that we've seen in the past. Thank you. this is the way that that people should be expressing their concern, and I think that you did so in a model way today. Thanks, Chair.
Well said, and of course, we're all rural residents out here. Of course, we do it the best. If there's nothing else, before we go to the report recommendations, is the technical amendment that the Vice Chair made carried? Perfect. So report recommendation that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, 1, recommend council approve an amendment to Volume 1 of the official plan for 4200 March Road to redesignate from green space to rural countryside, to remove the natural environmental area sub-designation, and to add the bedrock resource area overlay as detailed in document 2. Details of recommended official plan amendment. 2, recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 4200 March Road to rezone from environmental protection subzone 3, EP3, to mineral extraction, ME, as detailed in document 3. Details of recommended zoning to permit a quarry expansion. And 3, approve the consultation details section of this report. I'll ask the coordinator call the roll, please.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Luloff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
No.
Chair Brown,
Yes.
3 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all who came out today to speak. We'll move next to Strategic Initiatives Department, item 5.1, the South Bear Brook Wetland Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment. Staff will come up to the front here, and there is a presentation. So when you're ready, we'll get started.
Waiting for the slides to be pulled up there. Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So hello, Chair and councillors. My name is Tara Redpath, and I'm a Natural Systems Policy Planner with our Strategic Initiatives Department. I'm joined today by Nick Stowe, who is the Program Manager for Natural Systems, and by Nicole Hoover-Bianash, who is the Director for Climate Change and Resiliency. So we're here today to speak about an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for a wetland that has recently been designated as provincially significant, located in the southeast portion of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with some background on the province of Ontario's role in protecting provincially significant wetlands, or PSWs, as I'll refer to them throughout the presentation. PSWs are a matter of provincial interest, and the province has established criteria and procedures to determine if a wetland qualifies as provincially significant. The provincial planning statement requires municipalities to identify and protect PSWs from development and site alteration. The City of Ottawa meets this requirement by designating significant wetlands in its official plan and giving those wetlands protective zoning that restricts almost all development. The wetland evaluation process for the South Bear Brook lands was triggered when City Council approved expanding the urban boundary to include the future Taywin community. In January of 2024, the province updated their mapping and the status of the South Bear Brook wetland to provincially significant, following the submission of a wetland evaluation in accordance with provincial methodology. City staff are now obliged to bring forward corresponding updates to the designations of our official plan and to the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Wetlands provide multiple environmental, social, and economic benefits, such as flood risk reduction, water quality improvement, carbon sequestration, and wildlife habitat. Wetlands in Ontario are significant if they meet minimum scoring thresholds established under the Provincial Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, or OES for short. Wetland evaluations must be carried out by qualified evaluators. The studies involve mapping the wetlands boundaries and determining the significance based upon biological, socioeconomic, hydrology, and special features components.
Each component is worth 250 points for a total of up to 1,000 points. A wetland that scores 200 points or more in either the biological or special features component, or 600 points in total or more, qualifies as provincially significant. In 2022, the province passed Bill 23, which included substantial changes to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System methodology and approvals process. Next slide, please. So turning to the South Bear Brook wetland evaluation, the city initiated this wetland evaluation process by hiring an independent consultant to undertake the evaluation in accordance with the OS. 561.5 hectares of the South Bear Brook wetland qualifies as provincially significant. The wetland received a total score of 754, including a subscore of 250 for the special features component. It meets the threshold for provincial significance as the total score is over 600 and the special features component is over 200. Today's amendments will align the schedules of the official plan and the zoning bylaw provisions with the provincially significant wetland mapping that has been accepted and published by the Provincial Ministry of Natural Resources. Lands within the wetland boundary would be redesignated to green space with a sub-designation of significant wetland. These lands will also largely be rezoned to EP, which is the Environmental Protection Zone under the EP3 subzone. The designation and zoning of lands that are outside of the wetland boundary will remain unchanged. Next slide, please. So here is a map just demonstrating the location of the PSW itself. It's located towards the southeast corner of Ottawa, southeast of the future Taywin community, which is shown in gold. The wetland, of course, is shown in blue on the map. The wetlands are loosely bordered by Highway 417 to the north, Boundary Road to the east, Mitch Owens Road to the south, and Farmers Way to the west. Next slide, please. So I just want to touch on permitted uses within PSWs. So within the EP3 subzone, existing land uses and uses that do not interfere with the wetland are typically permitted. Permitted uses include a detached dwelling, a home-based business, and an accessory building or structure. Forestry operations, environmental preserves, and education areas are also permitted. Any development in the wetland and within a 30-meter buffer is also subject to the regulations of the South Nation Conservation Authority and their permit requirements. Any development applications within 120 meters of the significant wetlands will require a supporting environmental impact study in accordance with official plan policies. I would like to also point out that these amendments will not limit any existing agricultural uses nor activities outside of development or site alteration. Next slide, please. So just to touch on the public engagement that was undertaken through this process, city staff launched this wetland evaluation by holding a virtual public information session to explain the provincial requirements, the evaluation process, and the possible implications. City staff also sent letters to property owners requesting permission to access private lands for the purpose of assessing the wetlands. We received responses for nearly 200 properties, and almost all property owners granted permission. Since the beginning of the study, the city has maintained a web page to describe the process, provide results, and highlight the next steps. Following the study completion and the provincial updates to their mapping, city staff mailed an information package to all affected property owners. For these amendments, the zoning amendment and the official plan amendment, public notification and consultation have been undertaken in accordance with the Planning Act in the same manner as all other planning applications. Next slide, please. So wetland evaluations are technical reports. They're carried out by qualified evaluators according to provincial methodology, and the results are not subject to direct appeal. However, wetlands are open files and conditions can change and fluctuate over time. Wetland evaluations and the boundaries of PSWs can always be revised or updated based on more current information. This process can be initiated by individual property owners. Property owners that disagree with the identification of a PSW may hire a qualified wetland evaluator at their own expense to carry out wetland mapping on their properties. The updated wetland mapping and evaluation, if there are updates, must be submitted to the Ministry of Natural Resources for revision of the provincial mapping. Any changes that are accepted by the ministry must also be sent to the City of Ottawa, and we will then update our official plan schedules and our zoning bylaw. As with all Planning Act applications, affected property owners may appeal the decision of City Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, provided they have established the right of appeal by either making the written submissions to the city or the oral presentation at today's public meeting. I would like to note also that landowners with more than half an acre of PSW on their property may qualify for a property tax exemption under the Provincial Conservation Land Tax Incentive Program. Last slide, please. So thank you for the opportunity to speak at ARAC this morning, or this afternoon, I guess. Our team will be pleased to take any questions following the delegations.
Thank you very much, Tara. So we do have 4 registered delegates who wish to make a few comments here. We also received a few written correspondence just for the committee's knowledge. So I'll ask Keith, Danielle, Janet, and Sarah to more or less make your way to the front. And we're going to start with Keith and then go to Danielle as the second speaker.
Apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, first of all, that I'm not there in person. I misread the communication sent to me. It would have been much easier had I been there for everybody concerned. I would like to share my desktop, if I can do that. I've sent the request.
No, Keith, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to share your screen, but can you?
Well, that will be even more of a challenge. I will do the best I can. So I would like, if I could, to share the presentation deck that I prepared with the committee, if that's possible. At a later date, it doesn't have to be this moment.
I know we did receive one document from you, Keith, so that's on file. And we're just looking to see here if the coordinator has it. But if not, why don't you carry on, because we will be able to see this following your delegation.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll begin. I had to pare this down from a 20-minute presentation to 5 minutes, so bear with me. Rezoning will reduce property values. It will take away owners' rights to use and enjoy their property. When you take away the potential to use land, you take away some of its value. When you significantly restrict what you can use land for, you take away most of its value. Few potential buyers will want land with limited uses. Property values will decline as a result. The loss is in the tens of millions of dollars. Taxes should decline to reflect the loss in value. Remember, we were talking market value assessment. And I also just heard that there is a way, if you own more than half an acre, I think it was, you can get an exemption. So taxes will go down. Your write-up in support of this rezoning says there are no financial implications to rezoning. This is not true. As I just pointed out, both the existing landowners and the city will lose. Taiwan does not need land to be designated to set up a natural land trust. If they own it, they can make it a land trust. But rezoning would lower Taiwan's tax bill and make it cheaper to buy up other lands Taiwan does not currently own. Remember, property values will decline. There is a huge financial benefit to Taiwan if rezoning goes ahead. Down the road, Taiwan could change its mind about the land trust and get designation removed. All Taiwan would need to do is to discredit the study that designation is based on. I plan to show you just how easily Taiwan could do that. I had a nice map showing you what areas I want to talk to. I want to compare two areas within the slide that was previously put up by staff. I want to compare part of the Taiwan properties that have been allowed for the development. I want to look at the area that is that would be south of Leitrim, north of what I used to call Seventh Line. I guess, sorry, it's the block on the top left corner at any rate. And I want to compare that with the block. It's more like a triangle where I reside. That's in the very top portion of the land that has been designated as provincially significant wetland. And I would like to compare those. I did have another slide, but I can do it in words. Both areas were farmed. More recently, they were both heavily treed, mostly with evergreens. And very recently, those trees were stripped and pulped. In the 1970s, both areas were part of a plan to build a 6,000-acre satellite city by the Ontario Housing Corporation and the National Capital Commission. Canceling that had nothing to do with the area being a wetland. None of these shared characteristics are consistent with being a wetland. Additionally, there was a proposal to build a solar farm on the test area. This too is not consistent with a wetland. Both areas were assessed by the city. Taiwan was found not to be a wetland. The test area was determined to be a provincially significant wetland. This despite the Taiwan land being 4 meters, that's 12 feet or more than a story, lower than the test area in some places. I assert that if the Taiwan area is not a wetland, then the test area is not a wetland. So designation is based on a study done for the city. The study found that the 592 hectare study area was 92% swamp and 7% marsh. This means that 99% of 592 hectares, is the equivalent of the Mare Blue or the Leitrim wetlands. This is a crock, as anyone knows who lives in the area. But I will focus only on the test area, as I know this area with absolute certainty. I have walked every inch of the test area over every season for over 60 years. I can say without hesitation that the test area is neither swamp nor marsh. There is no swampy or marshy areas. There are none of the characteristics of a swamp or a marsh. Except for the early spring before the frost has left the ground, there is no surface water. The soil is not soggy. You do not need protective footwear in any season other than early spring and, of course, winter. You do not need a boardwalk like you see in the Mare Blue or the Leitrim wetland. It shares no characteristics with these areas. There is no swamp or marsh.
You're just out of time, so I'll give you a few seconds to wrap up if you could, please.
Okay, my apologies. I have reevaluated the test area following the methodology that is used. If you take away the fact that it was identified as 92% swamp and 7% marsh, all of the scores go away. The scores that I could share this with you. The scores that I come up with are 502 for the overall score and 100 for the special features score. That's below what you need to have this designated. The reason is the methodology that you use is biased. It is biased because by aggregating a whole bunch of little areas, you can create a huge score. You can find something that qualifies to increase your score. That is a bias. If I were to take all of Southern Ontario and run it through this methodology, I would get a perfect score for all of Southern Ontario, which should not be a provincially designated wetland.
Thanks,
so
Keith.
I'm telling you your study is wrong.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, so thank you very much. And if you would like to share the presentation, just in case we didn't receive it, we'll certainly review that following the committee meeting. But thank you very much for attending virtually today.
Thank you.
Danielle, we'll have you come up next, and following Danielle will be Janet Stavinga.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the City of Ottawa, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Our names are Robert and Danielle Beeler, and we sit here before you not only as concerned property owners, but also as members of a family that has held and cared for land for over 35 years. We are here to respectfully contest the proposed zoning change for what it is now, for what is now being referred to as the South Bearbrook wetland, which is set to be considered by the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee today. My uncle received an email from the City of Ottawa on March 26, 2025, informing him that this proposal is being reviewed today. As you can imagine, the timing of this proposal came as a complete surprise to us, especially given the long-term plans our family has had for this property, and provided us with little time for us to provide our comments to the City of Ottawa. However, given the significant impact that this proposal would have on our family should it be approved, we have dedicated the necessary time and care to write letters to the required parties and to be here with you today. To provide some context, my family has owned the land located at 5425 Piperville Road for over 3 decades. Over the last several months, we have been actively discussing plans to sever a portion of this land so that my husband and I can build a family home and grow our family. After completing our educational journeys and starting our careers, we are finally in a position where our dream of building a home on this land is feasible. This is something that we've worked towards for years, and the current zoning, the rural countryside zone, aligned perfectly with our intentions. However, the proposed change to environmental protection zone threatens to derail these plans and restrict our ability to use this property in the way we had envisioned. The change would create significant barriers to the residential development we had intended, not just for us, but for my father and his brothers on that land as well. It is my understanding that when they initially purchased the land 35 years ago, they did so with the hope of retiring here and building their own homes once they had the time to enjoy it, a dream they've carried with them all these years. Now, with my father only 27 days away from retirement, the proposed zoning change effectively pulls away the realization of this long-awaited vision. Of course, we understand that there must be a balance between environmental protection and meeting the needs of a growing population, especially in a city like Ottawa. We are aware that the need for wetland evaluation was triggered by the City Council's approval of new urban lands to accommodate the new Taywin community. However, we also have further concerns about the reported results of the evaluation, which brings into question the government's motivation for this new wetland designation. As an environmentalist, I have always been a strong advocate for the conservation of wetlands. However, I do not feel or believe that our land merits this designation. The description of the wetland as described in the Parsons Land Survey, which a company hired by the City of Ottawa, is not applicable to our land. Our property is a dry, forested area rather than a marsh or a swamp as was reported. There are also no maintained walking paths or RV trails as was described in the study on our land. In fact, it was even noted in the study that only 31.93 out of the 561.48 hectares of land are even considered seasonally flooded swamp, while none were considered seasonally flooded. If water was identified on or around our land during the evaluation, this could be attributed to the fact that the field visits were conducted in 2022 and done so during periods of significant weather events, including several storms, such as the Derecho on May 22nd, and, for my calculations, 17 reported days of rain throughout June and July. I feel that this raises questions about the accuracy of the data used for the evaluation. The potential impact of such weather on the land's ecological assessment is something that needs to be carefully considered before making such an important decision that directly impacts the economic and social welfare of the community. We acknowledge the environmental concerns, and they can be critical, and we take those matters seriously. However, the designation of the land based on certain species, such as the monarch butterfly and snapping turtle, and the inclusion of the great blue heron nests raises concerns about the thoroughness of the evaluation. The 185 points added to the wetland designation for the species that are either not provincially significant per the Committee on the Status of Species at Risk in Ontario or do not receive habitat protection seems questionable. For example, species like the eastern wood pewee and the wood thrush are listed as special concern but do not receive these protections that would justify such a high score. Additionally, considering the vast size of the surveyed land, it's unclear how relevant these observations are to the portion of our land that we own and plan to develop, as none of these species have ever been identified on our property. As a social worker, I have been taught to think critically, to challenge injustice, and to question who stands to benefit and who stands to lose when decisions are made. It seems to me that the City of Ottawa and the Teewin landowners financially benefit from the development of the Teewin community, while owners like us seem to lose.
Danielle, your time has elapsed, but why don't you take a few seconds to wrap up?
Yeah. So I strongly feel that we are being treated as scapegoats for the City of Ottawa's decision to develop previously existing wetlands and have not been given due process to defend our land to its rezoning. We respectfully urge the City of Ottawa to reconsider the proposed zoning change and to take into account the deep personal implications that this will have on my family as well as other affected families within the region. It's not about just a piece of land, it's about allowing hardworking people to maintain their self-determination to use their own land as they have envisioned, in my family's case, and for longer than I have been alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much and well said. I'm looking around to see if there are any questions from my colleagues. I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much. Janet, you're up next, and following Janet, we'll ask Sarah.
Good afternoon, Chair Brown and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As many of you are aware, the Friends of the Stittsville Wetlands are a volunteer, community-based, not-for-profit corporation committed to protecting, restoring, regenerating, and rewilding the fragile and ecologically significant wetlands in proximity to Stittsville, specifically the Goulburn Wetland Complex. Through the development of collaborative partnerships with the private sector and non-governmental organizations at the national, provincial, and local levels, the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands are working to safeguard the Goulburn Wetland Complex for those species that call them home, for ourselves, and for future generations. Another integral goal of our organization is to raise awareness of the ecological importance of wetlands and provide educational opportunities to engage the community in the protection, the restoration, the regeneration, and rewilding of our wetlands across our community, our city, and our province. It is the second goal that brings us here to speak with you today. First and foremost, I want to emphasize our utmost support for the proposed official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments that will protect the 561 hectares of South Bear Brook wetland that have been designated as provincially significant. We hear, though, and we respect the concerns of the landowners who are directly affected by these changes. However, we feel that this is ultimately a win for nature and for the surrounding communities who will continue to benefit from this incredible ecosystem. Wetlands of all kinds provide critical habitat for biodiversity. They reduce the impacts of floods, they purify our water, and they help keep greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. The evaluation of the South Bear Brook wetland shows that this specific ecosystem is particularly important for its ability to mitigate floods and provide key habitat for biodiversity, including several species at risk. The numerous benefits for people and nature contribute to these sections of the wetland for achieving a score well above the minimum threshold for provincial significant status and protection. The City of Ottawa's leadership in commissioning the evaluation of the South Bear Brook wetland to determine its significance is commendable and shows how much you care about protecting local natural areas. The care and the effort that was put into this evaluation makes, though, it particularly bittersweet to know that the area identified and protected as provincially significant could have been nearly twice as large, if not for the changes to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System made by the provincial government in the late fall of 2022. As you know, provincial changes to the Ontario wetland system have severely undermined the official methodology for identifying provincially significant wetlands and put wetlands across Ontario at risk. We've seen the dangerous implications playing out right here in the Ottawa area. The loss of the provincially significant status and protection for over 55 hectares of the Goulburn Wetland Complex near Stittsville showed how the weakened evaluation system allows existing provincially significant wetlands to lose that status and the protection that it affords. Now, the South Bear Brook Wetland Evaluation clearly shows how the new system also prevents incredibly valuable wetlands from receiving provincially significant status in the first place. These wetlands are not losing out on provincially significant status and protection because they're not important enough. Rather, the changes to the evaluation system raise the bar that must be met in order to receive that status, while also opening the door to the piecemeal evaluation of smaller sections of the larger wetlands without recognizing their connections to the broader ecosystems. Municipalities can no longer rely on the provincial policies to protect our most valuable wetlands. And I say this having served as an Ottawa City Councillor, a former mayor prior to amalgamation. That is why we strongly encourage the City of Ottawa to consider reflecting on the existing approach to protecting wetlands that are not considered provincially significant. Ultimately, the goal of our city should be to ensure wetlands are well protected regardless of their status as provincially significant or otherwise, so that we don't lose any more of these incredibly valuable ecosystems. Ontario Nature's new WISE practice report for local wetland conservation highlights several opportunities for municipalities to do just that, using concrete examples from communities across Southern Ontario. This report is referenced in our joint letter with Ontario Nature, and we hope it will be seen as a valuable resource, an opportunity to reflect how Ottawa can continue to step up as a leader for wetlands. We are excited to see such a large wetland area being rightfully protected and hope that there will be opportunities to do even more for wetlands across our city in the future. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much, Janet, and 6 seconds to spare, so appreciate that. Are there any questions from my colleagues? We're not seeing any. Thank you very much for coming today. Always great to hear from you. Sarah. Sarah's online. All right, Sarah, you've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Chair Brown and committee, it's great to meet you and kind of see virtually some staff whose names I recognize as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and the option to join virtually from my home in Waterloo. I certainly would have loved to be there with you in person, but it would have been a bit of a commute. My name is Sarah Hasenack, and I'm here as the Conservation Campaigns Coordinator with Ontario Nature. My apologies that that wasn't reflected when I registered as a speaker. Established in 1931, Ontario Nature is a registered charity that protects wild species and wild spaces through conservation, education, and public engagement. We represent more than 30,000 members and supporters and over 150 member groups across the province. This dedicated network of local conservation groups helps us to identify and engage with local issues that have provincial significance, which is what brings me here today. I'll be speaking to the South Bear Brook Wetland Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment supporting Mrs. Stavinga's delegation and the comments we submitted jointly on behalf of Ontario Nature and the Friends of Stittsville Wetlands, one of Ontario Nature's valued member groups. I'd like to start by echoing Mrs. Stavinga's support for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, applying strict local protections to the portions of South Bear Brook wetland that have been identified as provincially significant. I also commend the city's leadership in commissioning the evaluation of this wetland evaluation to determine its significance in advance of the Taywin development. This goes above and beyond provincial requirements, and as Mrs. Stavinga said, really shows how much you care about protecting your valuable natural ecosystems for the benefit of nature and for your community. It's encouraging as well to see in the response to our joint letter provided in the report that Ottawa's city staff are really committed to protecting wetlands that don't qualify as provincially significant, using the policies associated with the natural heritage overlays that are already established in your official plan. That said, my understanding is that these other wetlands may not be as well protected under city policies and bylaws as provincially significant wetlands are. In the case of South Bear Brook wetland specifically, for example, only the areas with provincially significant status will be receiving the environmental protection zoning, while the other wetlands will maintain their existing zoning types, which may allow for more types of development. Staff have also rightfully recognized in the report that the other wetland areas will continue to be regulated by the Conservation Authority. However, I think it's also important to remember the role of conservation authorities has been undermined in recent years due to provincial changes, which have limited their ability to contribute their full range of their expertise to land use planning decisions affecting wetlands and their other regulated areas. Because of the numerous provincial changes that have weakened protections and regulations for wetlands across the board, I'm joining Mrs. Stavinga in encouraging the City of Ottawa and municipalities across Ontario to ensure local policies protect wetlands in line with local needs, Indigenous rights and interests, and the best available knowledge. In an effort to support local wetland conservation initiatives, Ontario Nature has published a report earlier this year called Wetland Conservation for Local Planning Authorities, a review of wise practices in Southern Ontario. The report aims to provide municipal planning staff with a practical guide on how to effectively protect wetlands by featuring examples of how municipalities and conservation authorities across Southern Ontario are already doing just that, as Mrs. Stavinga mentioned. Given your city's demonstrated interest in protecting local wetlands like the South Bear Brook wetland and Ontario Nature's interest in seeing wetlands protected across the province, I think there might be opportunities for us to work together. I'd like to offer the new report as a potential resource to support this collaboration, we mentioned in our joint letter, and I welcome any chance to discuss this opportunity further with interested members of this committee, other council members, or city staff. My genuine congratulations again on protecting such a large area as a new provincially significant wetland, and I hope we can continue to discuss the ways to ensure, that more of Ottawa's precious wetlands are just as well protected. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thanks for coming in from Waterloo. I'm not sure if there are any questions from my colleagues. I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance today. We'll go to questions to staff. Colleagues, any questions? Not seeing. Go ahead, Councillor Kitts.
Thank you. Just a question I didn't see in the report. I know many of the landowners granted access to their properties to perform the required studies. Was there some that denied access?
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. There were a few property owners that sent the letters back with permission denied, yes.
But was there more that said yes than not?
Considerably more, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I've got a couple questions if Vice Chair. So in the last item, we were pretty constrained by provincial planning legislation. Can you speak to committee today about some of the provincial planning legislation that we're operating under for this particular file? And I guess my question, because I want to make sure that landowners' concerns are always heard here. Is the city doing this because we want to, or was there a trigger that necessitated this evaluation?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So through the province's provincial planning statement, there is a requirement for municipalities to protect provincially significant wetlands from development and site alteration. And the provincial planning statement refers to provincial methodology as updated or revised from time to time. So that is a direct reference to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. So the trigger in this case for initiating the wetland evaluation was the identification or the approval of urban expansion areas for the proposed Taywin community. So knowing staff had done a preliminary assessment, there was references to the natural heritage system in the area. We were aware that there was unevaluated wetlands in the area, and we put forward the recommendation through Annex 10 of the official plan that these wetlands be formally evaluated to determine whether or not they qualified as provincially significant under the province's policies.
Thank you. And I want to piggyback on a comment that Janet made. Originally, had the province not changed its evaluation criteria, the wetlands could have been doubled in size from what we see today in the report. Is that accurate?
Chair, that is correct.
And what changed that would exclude the other half of what potentially could have been designated as PSW?
So Chair, in the previous version of the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, it allowed for it allowed for the complexing of wetlands. So that means that any smaller units of wetland that were within 750 meters of each other could be linked together in that broader wetland complex. That concept of wetland complexing was one of the key things that was removed in the most recent update to the to the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System.
Thank you. My last question. We've got a lot of landowners in the area, a lot of farmers. Is agricultural production or existing uses on some of these properties going to be restricted if committee and council carry this report?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Existing land uses are not affected by these amendments.
Okay, thank you very much. Now the Vice Chair has a question.
Yeah, my
Go ahead.
apologies. I didn't mean to take your thunder, but you sparked a question. You had mentioned that these were previously unevaluated or unknown wetlands or hadn't been classified as significant. How many, or do we have a sense across the city how many of these may exist that are not considered significant yet or could someday be considered significant? And particularly if planning files are going to trigger these types of things, I would imagine that we are going to see more of these.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we estimate about 15% of the area of Ottawa has wetland in it. We estimate approximately half of that wetland remains unevaluated. Of course, the vast majority is well out in the rural area. And we typically do not initiate a wetland evaluation for smaller rural development, severances, et cetera, in the rural area adjacent to unevaluated wetlands. The trigger in this case was the identification of the proposed Taywin community in an area where we knew there was substantial wetland and where we needed to confirm whether or not that would be a factor in the approval or the planning of that community.
Last question, more that I'm just curious about this. So the wetlands that we're talking about are all naturally occurring wetlands, I'm assuming, but there are areas, at least this is my understanding, where development occurs, water is directed to a particular place, and wetlands can essentially be created. Am I wrong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there can be short-term changes in land use that would create a new wetland. Conversely, there can be activities that would drain a wetland. We do take that into consideration when we are recommending whether a wetland evaluation should be done. In this instance, we recommended, for example, the wetland evaluation on the east side of the proposed Taywin community, because the information we had suggested that they were largely of a natural area with natural drainage patterns. We did not recommend a wetland evaluation on the west side of Taywin, where there's also a fair amount of unevaluated wetland, because the land uses there historically were quite different, because the drainage patterns are quite different. There's a lot of tile drains and ditching there. And instead, what we are doing is through the South Bear Brook subwatershed study, we're looking more closely at the drainage in that area to come up with a recommendation of whether that should be evaluated or not.
Dr. Stowe, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Councillor Kitts.
Yeah, I should have given more context for my question earlier. So the reason I was asking if the majority of property owners granted access is because I know sometimes when it's a desktop exercise, it can be substantially more inaccurate, but you're confident that this study was thorough and that the wetlands that have been identified are in fact have the characteristics of wetland.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. We're confident that our evaluators followed the provincial methodology. They spent considerable number of hours. They did do ground truthing, on the ground field work. This is of course to supplement desktop analysis. In an area this large, you can't get away from using aerial photography, satellite imagery, soil mapping and the like, but this was supplemented by, on the ground field work where permission was granted.
Yeah. Okay, and again, there was substantial permission granted, so.
Yeah, I would add that approximately 85% of the lands are owned by the Algonquins of Ontario and Taggart, and they granted full access to their property for this purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Last call for any more questions, just in case. I will note for just one more time that we've received correspondence as well, written correspondence from James Robert Beeler, John Francis Beeler, and then Danielle, who's here today. So that's on file, and committee will be able to look through those documents following committee if they haven't already done so. The report recommendations. 1, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council approve the proposed amendments to the official plan as shown in Document 1 and detailed in Document 3. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council approve the proposed amendments to zoning bylaw number 2008-250 as shown in Document 1 and detailed in Document 4. And 3, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation details section of this report. Is this item carried? Carried. Were they registered delegates? Oh, sorry. Sure, come ahead, Danielle. Well, it's not typical, but you're here, so.
Just in reference to what was just talked about, I was going to get to that, but I ran out of time. But just to speak to that, the report suggested that there was an estimated 300 hours of in-person time that was dedicated to the completion of the field survey, which cast some doubt on how this was possible to accomplish within the reported 15 days in which it was stated it was done. And it would suggest that field surveyors were working 20-hour days on each of the 15 days. It may also be worth mentioning that 300 hours would not be nearly enough time to accurately survey even a small portion of the 561.48 hectares of land that the government is now essentially trying to take away from property owners. And also the fact that the salaries of the City of Ottawa staff responsible for the preparation and processing of the Taywin community are fully funded by the Taywin landowners seem to me like a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll take that away and offline, and I'm sure we can get some information on that, but in the interest of carrying on with proper procedures, this item carried. Thank you very much, colleagues. So Danielle, I'll follow up with you following committee. Thank you. Our next item, in-camera items, there are no in-camera items, so we'll move to the open mic session. We have 7 speakers, I believe, registered to speak. I'll just run through a few housekeeping items. There are no relevant staff in the room that can speak directly to anything that's raised by members through the open mic portion. However, I'm willing to have a conversation offline if there are some questions. Everyone will have 5 minutes to speak to the items that they've indicated that they'd like to address. And we're going to start with Tom Harris, and following that, it will be Eric Inward. Mr. Harris, welcome. Thank you for coming, and I'll just get you to turn your microphone on. Great, thanks so much.
Okay, and we have slides to put on. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the slides to be put up. Yeah, great. Almost everything is in that book that I'm showing you. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, council members and committee members. Next slide. The City of Ottawa wants to put in a lot of wind and solar power. Next slide. And there's a problem with that because, next slide, we see that they have both very low capacity factors. In other words, you don't have power when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. Next slide. So what happens is that in the case of wind, the most we get is about 38% capacity contribution. And that means that on average over the month, consumers can only count on wind power to deliver about 38% of its rated capacity during peak periods. Next slide. The solar situation is even worse. As you can see, it's peaking at around 13.8%. Next slide. So you need to have some way to back up the power when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And you might say, well, why don't we just use natural gas? Because of course, as we showed in one of the slides, natural gas has a very high capacity factor and it can be ramped up and down very quickly. But the concern, of course, is that they produce greenhouse gases and we want to reduce that by climate plans. So we're putting in this sort of thing, the battery energy storage system. Next slide. So the driver behind this is the climate scare, the idea that we are causing dangerous climate change because of our greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. The gas being targeted is carbon dioxide, which of course, despite the fact they call it carbon pollution, is not. You can see ambient versus different levels of CO2, you get more plant growth. Next slide. And NASA has shown that as CO2 has risen across the world, we've seen a huge increase in crop productivity and leaf area. Next slide. Now, we have to actually ask then, what is it that they're saying is the climate scare? What is actually causing the climate to change drastically? Next slide. It's this little dot here. You can't see it in the slide, but in the lower right-hand corner, there is one dot, which is man-made CO2 accumulated over 200 years. And I'll share these slides with you later, so by email, so that you can take a look at this. Next slide. This is the graph that is used to scare people the most about climate change. It's showing increase in global average temperature over the last 145 years. However, if you look at the graph closely and you look at the coordinate axis, what you find is that we're only talking about 1.2 degrees in 145 years. Next slide. If you put that on a graph that actually is the kind of temperature we experience from 0 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, you see that you don't even notice the change over the 145-year period. In fact, Richard Lindzen, another scientist, Richard's from MIT, he says that the change has been so slow that you wouldn't notice it in an entire human lifetime. Next slide. And in fact, the warming started about 300 years ago, long before CO2 started to rise. Next slide. And we find that if you go back 6,000 years, CO2 levels were very low, 280 parts per million in comparison with 420 today. And yet the temperature at 5,000 years ago was higher than today. Next slide. We know that's true because we see fossilized remains of white spruce about 100 kilometers north of the current tree line. And those have been radiocarbon dated to about 5,000 years ago. Next slide. I want to skip the next two slides for time concerns and end up, yeah, here we are. This is the book that's being handed out to everybody. This is being produced just before Christmas. You can see we were advertising it with a Christmas tree. And it's produced by a group called Canadians for Sensible Climate Policy. Heartland is also one of the editors or the publishers. I'm a co-author or a contributing author. And it goes through all kinds of interesting things. Next slide. For example, when were the all-time provincial and territorial high temperature records? Next slide. You can see that for Quebec, it was 1921, Ontario 1975, and the Maritimes was all a very long time ago. So nothing's happening with respect to maximum temperatures. Next slide. It's also interesting to notice that climate-related deaths are very, very low, 95% reduction. Next slide. I'd like to skip the next three slides, actually, because we're running out of time. This slide shows an interesting characteristic that should influence City of Ottawa, and that is that cold-related deaths massively exceed hot-related deaths. So, hey, more than 20 times as many people die from the cold than from the heat. And yet the City of Ottawa are only planning for warming in their adaptation. They're not planning for cooling, which especially for a high-latitude city like Ottawa, doesn't make really very much sense. Next slide. So here are the conclusions in the book. To summarize, so you don't have to read the whole book, extreme weather events are not increasing. Sea level rise is not unusual. The ocean is not acidifying. Climate-related deaths have decreased. Next slide. Cold deaths are much more prevalent than hot. Warming has been beneficial to society. Next slide. This then is the only cause or the only underlying factor of the climate scare. The climate scare is not supported by the data. The temperature change and all the other characteristics are too small to be considered a climate crisis. So this is the driver. The driver is the computer models. And models are, for example, in the red solid line, and the actual observations are in the dotted lines below. So the computer models don't work. They massively over-forecast the climate scare.
I'll just
Next
get you
slide.
to wrap up, Tom.
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to skip right 2 more slides, please. Yeah, so clearly there is no climate emergency. Next slide. So there's no need for wind and solar power expansion. Next slide. So when the climate scare collapses, these will become stranded assets. Next slide. And this means, and this is my concluding slide, there will be no need for battery energy storage systems when the climate scare collapses. They will be stranded assets. So I'm not expecting committee members to go back to the council and say, look, there's no climate scare, so we don't need BESS. I would like, however, for you to go back and try to slow down any BESS approval, because the bottom line is that when the climate scare collapses, and I believe it will very soon, we're seeing it across the world starting to collapse, you're going to have stranded assets, massive stranded assets that won't be used.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the delegate? Not seeing any, no. Thanks for coming out.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
We need a book for Councillor Luloff, though.
Okay, great.
Yes, and we'll get that to him downtown. I think we'll sign Councillor Kitts up to deliver that. So Eric, you're up next. Thank you. And Richard will follow Eric.
Thanks, guys. I recognize this is not one of the planned discussions today, so thanks for taking the time to listen to our comments afterwards. My topic is the same, but it is not going to be around a climate scare. In 2023, you as ARAC provided Evolution with the blueprint for what a successful best location looks like, and a blueprint for what a poor best location looks like, with their approval of the Trail Road location and the declining of the Fitzroy one. When we look at those 2 locations, the differences are quite stark. The Trail Road location is next to a highway, a landfill, a mineral and aggregate extraction area, whereas Fitzroy is next to a conservation area, heavily treed and rural, and not near a highway at all. If we look at the currently proposed Marchhurst location through the lens of these 2 blueprints, I think it's pretty clear which location it mimics. I do not propose to know why Brookfield is choosing to follow a failed blueprint and not a successful blueprint. Occam's razor would suggest that the simplest explanation is the most accurate. And if you look at the fact that that location is being planned to sit underneath the hydro lines, perhaps that is the reason that they are proposing it there. The Carp Hills area is one of the most sensitive wetlands in Ottawa. It's the 2nd largest natural area in Ottawa behind the Gatineau Park. It is home to over 800 species, 45 of which are plant species at risk and 10 of which are animal and fauna species at risk. To propose a location of this size and this potential disaster right next to an area in the zone of influence to an EP zone, provincially significant wetland like that, is completely irresponsible. There's a lot of people behind me today still planning to talk about this BESS. I don't want to go into the same things over and over again. So to save time, I thought I would share a little bit of a personal reason why I'm opposed to this location. In doing my research for this talk today, I'm fairly confident to say that I live on the longest single exit cul-de-sac in Ward 5. It's 3.5 kilometers long, one way in, one way out. John Asselford Drive, you can look it up. John Asselford, my backyard's about 1 kilometer away from this site with just trees and dead wood in between, and it's about the same distance from this site to the front of the street. On a good day, takes me maybe 5 minutes to get from my house to the end of the street. That is a long time for 3.5 kilometers, but the street's quite narrow, and there's about a dozen 60 to 75 degree turns along the street. The reasoning for installing BESS facilities, or that Ottawa's accepted BESS facilities is due to the climate, right? I think that's a pretty common acceptance, let's say. But in accepting that, then by proxy, the city's getting hotter. And if the city's getting hotter, then the forests are getting hotter. And when trees and dead wood get hotter, they get drier. These BESS facilities are known to cause explosions. They're known to have fires. So in a not unlikely worst case scenario where one of these facilities catches fire and this fire moves through a heated forest with dead wood and it moves only 1 kilometer to the edge of my street, how am I going to get my family out? Am I supposed to walk through 10,000 acres of forest? Am I supposed to drive through a fire? This isn't Hollywood, right? I've got a wife, I've got a toddler, I've got 2 infants. What about the elders on my street, the people who have been here for 40 years, who might not hear an alarm in the middle of the night? How are they going to get out? No matter the merits that we're discussing about the benefits to a battery facility like this, I'm not here to talk about that, right? I think the city and province have decided that this is going to be an important part of energy reliance moving forward, but they absolutely need to be cited properly. And even if we're going to ignore the location of them in one of the most significant natural areas, not just in the city, but in the province as a whole, why is it going next to the longest single exit street in the city with no way out for the residents? Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Well spoken, Richard. All right, Joseph. Sorry, that was Eric. Richard, come on down. I'm sorry. It's been a long morning, early afternoon. Following Richard will be Joseph.
Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for having me here to the committee. I would like to address the fundamentally flawed BESS proposals for rural Ontario, including West Carleton and other adjacent areas to the region. Not only does BESS pose serious environmental health risks to the community, it also causes huge increase in electricity costs generated by intermittent wind and solar facilities. Batteries would take excess power at night from solar and wind sources. Spring, fall seasons are when wind is most consistent. However, demand is lower at 17,000 megawatts in Ontario. Summer is the biggest demand period at 22,000 megawatts. Batteries can only store and discharge up to 4 hours of power. In September 2023, for 3 days, natural gas power plants produced approximately 250,000 megawatts. How much storage would we need over these 3 days? According to how much battery storage would we need over these 3 days? According to energy expert Parker Gallant, it would cost over $600 billion to store and discharge 250,000 megawatts. Cost of natural gas, by comparison, would be approximately $60 billion. If you divide the $600 billion battery pack over 20 years, that would be essentially the life of the proposal. That would equal $30 billion of cost per year for Ontario ratepayers, equal to about the current cost to ratepayers now. This would represent then doubling of the current cost. Natural gas is cheaper and available to ramp up on higher demand days, especially in summer when wind often produces no power at all. With respect to lowering CO2 emissions, emissions created from manufacturing the batteries is actually more than what the BESS will save in the future. We are creating more emissions now to avoid future emissions. We need power that can be efficiently ramped up when greater demand is needed. On average, industrial wind turbines produce 29 to 30% of their power capacity, less than 15% in the summer. In the summer peak demand time of over 22,000 megawatts, BESS systems appear to be impractical. Most of the batteries come from China. China relies heavily on coal-fired power plants and thus doubles up the emissions related to the battery manufacturing process. These batteries are transported by ship, further adding to emissions generated in the whole setup. Lithium is primarily mined in the lithium triangle in South America. During extraction, much of the surface and groundwater in the area is taken up for processing, leaving little to no water for area farmers. Even batteries not made in China actually source their materials from China, which is not noted for environmental and human rights standards. According to Article 4 of the UN nation's Framework Convention on Climate Change, the first and overriding priority of developing countries is poverty alleviation and development. China is not compelled to decrease emissions by 2030, and India is increasing its coal use by 60%. Canada, by contrast, emits 1.5% of global emissions. Locating a solar farm near a hydro dam. Solar farms can rush the water up, and when the sun goes down, rush the water out. In essence, hydro dam could act as a battery, a natural renewable way to store it. These BESS facilities need HVAC systems to cool the batteries when hot. Many times these BESS don't work when it's cold. Must maintain a consistent optimal temperature. For example, BESS systems have a rated storage capacity of, say, 411 megawatts. That appears to be a bit misleading. What you put in is not what you actually send back out. It is losing a significant amount, upwards of 50%. Costs are $600,000 per megawatt and up to $1.5 million per megawatt. Compare with other energy sources such as coal, which is coming in at $50 per megawatt versus $600,000 per megawatt. And bear in mind that we are actually using kilowatt hours. It becomes quite unaffordable. Francis Merton, the Energy Storage Conundrum Report, asked 3 questions. How much storage would it take to back up a provincial electricity grid or local grid? How much will that storage cost? What is the maximum length of time that the energy must be held in storage before it is called upon? And does the proposed technology even capable of storing the amount of energy for that period of time? Now, skip ahead to conclusion. BESS cannot store rated power for any length of time, and when discharged, it does not deliver rated power it's stored. BESS is not technologically able to keep a grid running, to keep the frequency, the hertz that it needs, to keep the voltage that it needs 24/7, 365 days, no matter the weather. There may be breakthroughs in the future, though, such as splitting the lithium atom. Renewables are tied to the BESS systems. Ontario is embarking on a path that has more than double the cost of electricity for ratepayers. As of late, in lieu of subsidies, as of late 2023, costs have been moved to over to the taxpayers, who are now being charged $10.4 billion.
Sorry, Richard, I'll just get you to wrap up.
Sure. Prime agricultural land is currently being rezoned for these industrial uses. So BESS systems are astronomically expensive, environmental and health risks, not reliable for long periods of time, and does not reduce greenhouse gas emissions due to the manufacturing process of these batteries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming out. I'm not seeing any questions from my colleagues, so thank you. Joseph, you're next, and then Raymond following Joseph.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Me and my wife came 32 years ago from Switzerland, and we built up that farm. And now they want to build a BESS site on the other side, the 417. It's about 200 meters away from our farm. Like, I talked to my insurance broker. There's no way they would insure our cows, our health for that. There's no way they insure it, because you have to understand, we have all the land around the BESS site, and our cows need healthy feed. And when that thing burns, like, we don't know how we're going to bring 400 animals out. There's no barn empty someplace ready for that. Like, that's a big, big issue for us. So it's a big concern for us. And we really didn't got notified. We live so close and we're not notified. So it's really not fair at all. Like, I have 2 kids that take over the farm, and we have 5 grandkids, and like, I don't see any future. Like, when that thing comes up, I have to move. and I can't put my cows in the pocket and just move away. And our property is going to be worth 30% less at least. We have to understand that. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much for coming and speaking. I'm not sure any questions or, that's all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Raymond, there we go. And Aileen will follow Raymond.
Hello, everybody. I'm also a dairy farmer, right close to the proposed site in North Glengarry. What worries us is the safety issues. Just in September, there was a big fire at the Montreal port with those lithium batteries. People had to be expropriated. Just this January, there was a bigger one in Moss Landing in California. So we're really worried. I'm third generation dairy farmer there, and my son's taking over, and I've got grandchildren, and I'm hoping for a nice future for them. So this is like a time bomb if it gets put in, because the dangers of them exploding is very high, and so I'm hoping that will be stopped, and I guess that's about it. Hope we can stop those best installations from being put in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming out today. Appreciate your time. Now Aileen's online, I'm told.
Oh.
We could promote her.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely. The floor is yours. Go
I
ahead.
don't know how to put in for video, but anyway, at least you can hear me. Thank you for having me. Was there any question for Raymond?
No, there wasn't. So it's all you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know that every municipality, they have the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, right? Which is called OSHA. Correct? Hello?
Yep, I believe so. Carry on.
Okay. Well, my reason for saying this is because the improper battery storage can lead to serious incidents such as fire, chemical leaks, and even explosion. These not only pose significant risk to your employees' safety, but can also result in costly damage to property and productivity loss. And the reason I'm putting this before you is because the last OSHA emphasizes the need for employees to train their employees on safe storage practices for lithium-ion battery. And these, what we're talking about Duracell, Energizer, Ray, and these can cause that type of effect. And you also have, I believe, trained your employees in order to be able to handle those kind of incident that could occur. So I'm going to switch to, these are just little batteries where you have come up with training and everything for the employees. Now let's go to the battery energy storage system. Now the Ontario Federal Agriculture, they are also have reviewed some of the best, and they are in the hope that agencies can procure and license these facilities, adopt prudent recommendation that allow Ontario's energy regulator to accommodate Ontario's build out of clean, reliable grid system, and so forth. Now, they have also done some recommendation because they are not responsible for, they already said they're not responsible for these type of incidents should it occur. But they did make some recommendation, and one of them was the Ontario's energy regulator contractual obligate proponents and all subsequent BESS owners to take steps to ensure that fire and other safety risks are managed effectively. But who is going to supervise this? Who's going to inspect those? It doesn't say anything about that. This includes supporting the training of firefighters on managing chemical fires, ensuring fire services are financially prepared to control BESS events, as well as installing automated fire prevention and fire suppression mechanism in their BESS. To my knowledge, which I've spoken to firefighters, they have so far not been trained at all for these type of fires. And if you recall, or if you've seen the Moss Landing fire that occurred in California, it's the biggest fire of all from all over the world, because these BESS facilities, when they catch on fire, it's not if they catch on fire, it's when they catch on fire. Firefighters cannot put them out. They're not equipped to put them out. There's no training for the firefighters. And I wish, to ask the fire marshal if they've come up with any solution to these fire from the BESS, the fire occurring from a BESS facility. So I haven't asked them yet, but apparently somebody is in the process of asking the fire marshal if there's any regulation regarding those for the firefighters to be protected from that. Now, I know I don't have too much time left, but there is another thing. These BESS fires, apparently they have to comply with manufacturers' instruction for certain codes and standards. Well, I'm not even sure that there are codes and standards and regulation yet set out by the government or anywhere else. So I'm kind of wondering, like, who's going to bear the cost for the loss of production and all in neighboring farmers and residents affected, and who is going to ensure that inspections have been done? There's so many questions. Apparently as well, the government should be reviewing the manufacturer's instructions, because apparently these companies go according to manufacturing instructions, which I have no clue what that is. Anyway,
your time is elapsed. I'll just get you to wrap up, okay?
Okay, thank you. While it is critical to begin work, to prepare for higher demand for energy regulators, energy regulators must proceed carefully to ensure our critical food system are not compromised to reach electrification goals. And another recommendation that the OFA had recommended is that because of the fires occurring, they want to increase the distance away from a land farm. In any case, I am opposed to those where they are near agricultural land. They can find another zoning part where it wouldn't affect agricultural land, where we can lose our farmers.
Eileen, I'm going to have to cut you off, but thank you very much for coming out.
Okay, thank you very much for hearing me out.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Michael is our next speaker, and he's just coming down from the back of the room here.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brown and committee members, thank you for adding me. I was a late addition. My email got a little bit waylaid. Just shows us what can go wrong with technology, true and trusted. I'm here to speak a little bit about my concerns about the BESS proposed for South March. The proponent, through its various marketing pieces and website, has done an exceptionally good job of selling the highlights, highlighting the features, advantages, and benefits of the facility. The approach I'd like to take this afternoon is as if I were a consumer employing a caveat emptor or let the buyer beware approach to evaluating this facility. I know I'm limited for time. I have about 10 pages of concerns, which I will happily email to you later this afternoon. Eric, who spoke earlier, is my neighbor. I live kitty corner across the street from him. So this facility is about 1.5 kilometers from my home as the crow flies. I'm a runner. I run the street every day. Well, that's a lie, 4 times a week. And another concern is air quality, because a safety feature that you might not be aware of this facility to prevent an explosion are ventilation panels that will pop, releasing toxic contaminants and gases into the air that I might be breathing on one of my daily runs. Again, I lie, one of my 4 weekly runs. I'll be breathing these contaminants before OFS has even received an alarm that there's something wrong. So I don't want to be the canary in the coal mine. As others have mentioned, this BESS is located near an environmentally significant area. The Board of the Friends of the Carp Hills Science-Based Conservation Group has considered the proposal, and they've publicly opposed it. Their decision reinforces the fact that it's the wrong location for a BESS complex. And in their statement of support, they asked a very pertinent question. Why would anyone place an industrial facility next to a provincially significant wetland complex and a candidate provincially significant area of natural and scientific interest that is home to 9 species at risk? The proponent has said that they're going through all the necessary permitting, including environmental assessments. However, if we look to Ontario's Guide to Environmental Approval Requirements, only the transmission elements of a BESS are required to be evaluated. So one of my concerns is, will this facility receive a full evaluation from the environmental perspective? The proposed BESS is going to be located over a highly vulnerable aquifer. The proponent has stated the risk of groundwater contamination from firefighter runoff during a BESS fire is estimated to be minimal. They've also stated, due to industry standards across North America, that there's never been an impact on groundwater from BESS insulation, even after a serious incident. However, what they've not acknowledged is this BESS is located over a highly vulnerable aquifer. And my question to them would be, these incidents that you're referring to, have any of these BESS facilities been located also over a highly vulnerable aquifer? Minimal risk does not equate zero risk. This is our source of water. Aquifers are extremely expensive, if not impossible, to clean up once they're contaminated. And they're also connected to rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands in the region. So if the groundwater gets contaminated, streams, lakes, drinking water might be contaminated as well, including our well water. We're all familiar with Moss Landing and what happened after Moss Landing. One of my concerns with the proponent is their response to questions that I had about environmental and health concerns after that incident. They basically claimed that there were no reports of health incidents. And also, when we talked about soil contamination, that there's never been an incident of soil contamination after a BESS incident. We all know that there have been multiple reports of people suffering ill effects, health effects after Moss Landing. We also know that soil has been contaminated as far as 20 miles away now from the site. So my concern, if they're downplaying the risk associated with that facility, are they downplaying the risk associated with the proposed facility? Another thing that they have said is that most contaminants will burn off. There is no such thing as clean burning. The scientists that found the soil contamination at Moss Landing estimated in the smoke plume that there were 1 million pounds of contaminants.
I'll just indicate that your time's elapsed, so if you want to wrap up there, Michael.
Okay, so I'll go to my summary. In summary, the EPRI BESS failure event database lists some 10 to 15 reported incidents each year. It's clear that the risks associated with BESS are here to stay, and with the ever-increasing number and size of BESS projects that are being installed around the world, there will be more incidents. The industry is in its infancy. It's continuing to learn from these incidents, but there is no one solution or one design that is inherently safe and that cannot go into a cascading thermal runaway with the potential to spread to other units if these are placed too close together. With over 1,100 local resident signatures on our petition opposing the location of the proposed South March BESS, it is clear that our community does not want to be the next best learning opportunity for the industry. Together, we're sending a strong message. South March is not the place for a BESS complex. The Ontario government, the provincial government has stated it will not approve projects in communities that do not support them. This means our voices matter. The future of our neighborhood is in your hands, and we implore you to let common sense prevail. We do support new energy solutions, but they must be built on appropriate commercial and industrial lands, not in residential rural areas near protected wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just say, whether you're running 7 days a week or 4 days a week, you're running more than I am. So it's all good. Now, I know I don't have anyone after Michael for BESS, but if there's anyone in the room that signed up when they came in that would like to speak to this item, happy to entertain another delegate. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to take advantage of the open mic on any other matter? Just making sure. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. And I will mention two things. Number one, this committee stood unanimously with the residents of West Carleton the last time there was an application that came forward in the ward. And I think it was very clear, and Eric, I think, spoke to it very well, that we provided as a committee a blueprint for an acceptable application and a blueprint for an unacceptable application. And certainly, although there's no application before us today, I think that lesson is still out there. And should any other applications come forward, because there isn't one before us today, we're hoping that it would follow the blueprint that this committee has indicated that we could support. The other thing I'll mention is the Rural Affairs Committee is the only committee of council that permits an open mic session that allows or affords residents to come and discuss matters that aren't on the agenda. And I think today is a great example of why that's important. We want to make sure we hear from you, and we have today. So thank you very much for those who waited for the entire committee meeting to come out and be heard. Now, Councillor Kitts, I believe you have a notice of motion, if you'd like to read that in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Whereas the Ward 20 office received inquiries from businesses in the Greeley Business Park regarding the fact that there was always stop control at the intersection of McEwen Drive and Barfield Road, and whereas the T-shaped intersection currently has always stop control, even though traffic volumes and conditions within the industrial park do not meet the warrants established for always stop control as confirmed by traffic services staff. Therefore, be it resolved that the traffic services staff be directed to remove the always stop control at the intersection of McEwen Drive and Barfield Road, maintaining the current stop sign southbound on Barfield Road and removing the stop signs located on McEwen Drive.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll consider that at our next regular meeting. Are there any inquiries? Any other business? Seeing none. The next meeting will be Wednesday, the 9th of April, a special joint meeting with the Planning and Housing Committee, update on the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 Consistency Review, and our next regular meeting of the Rural Affairs Committee will be the 1st of May, 2025. So with that, can we stand adjourned? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and to staff for all your work today. Thank you.